attendance for a few people that I just want to know about, like our board members. And I see myself. I need to get a list of who's here. Let's see if there's a convenient way to do this, since I'm not altogether familiar with this.
Hey, Bob, I think on the bottom you can click on participants and it'll pull up a list for you.
I guess
Yeah, that's the
I was
best way
already
to see
doing
the
that,
list.
but it's not sorted in any helpful manner.
No.
So let's see. Do we have Mike Baranski?
Yeah, he's here by phone only.
Okay, Alvin is here. David Campbell?
See, David's not on the list.
Jillian? Don't think she's going to be here. Janet's here. Carrie's here. I think I saw Cindy come in.
Yeah, Cindy Lakin's here. Yep.
Jim, I don't know if he got here by phone.
Jim Matthews is here, yes.
Milo was around. Chris is here. Matt's here. Caroline's here. Julie's here. John Wilson?
He's here. He's here with me.
Okay, so we have the critical staff people here. I think we can start. My general agenda for the day is I'll just do some recap of what's been going on for the last year. Then we'll have some reports from various people if they care to report. Then we have to have an election of our board. Then we'll have some presentation of some awards. Then Lesley will talk about the plant conservation program and activities. Julie will tell us about some things in a presentation for us, Julie Moore. Then Lesley will tell us more about adding plants to the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan. We'll take a short 10-minute break. And then we'll have Olivia tell us about what's been going on with the volunteer program and open things up for discussion about how to make this program better for everybody. So are you being able to hear me all right? Is any complaints here? All is well? Okay. So what's been going on over the last year? In addition to my figuring out what this organization's about as an officer, which was interesting. I had a few people educate me. Kathy was very helpful, and Mimi was very helpful, and Alvin was very helpful. So I learned a lot. We've had a renewal campaign to try and get people to renew their memberships. When I last looked about a week ago, we had 112 members signed up for 2020. And though, if you haven't paid your dues yet, but had in 2019, you still get to vote here. So there are 45 of those. So we basically are doing a little better than we were doing a year ago in terms of total numbers. Not hugely better, but we're up maybe 10% or 15%. So that's good. We just need to keep recruiting more folks. In our renewal campaign this year, we created some new categories rather than such dull things as friend or sustaining. We named them after kinds of plants that we happen to care about. I hope people haven't minded being now a blazing star or a smooth coneflower or a Venus flytrap. But we have had quite a few people elect those things, and seemingly they're positive about this new approach, and that seems to be going well. One of the major challenges of the past year has been trying to figure out how to make this organization sustainable, given that we don't have any employees and we've got a lot of work that needs to get done. Well, we don't have any permanent employees, I should say. I don't mean to put down the great work that Olivia has done for us. We'll get back to that in a minute. But we've been trying to figure out how to make this an organization that will work efficiently. We've had a lot of help from Lori Wright at PCP and in terms of making bank deposits and recording things in our list of members as it comes in. So we're very grateful for that. Olivia has, of course, been working half-time with us all year as our volunteer coordinator. hosting events and organizing things. It's not been the best of years to do lots of things, what with COVID in the way, but she's been very helpful and productive, and we thank you, Olivia. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to retain her over the long term, because having that half-time position really helps us reach out to our potential audience across the state and provide opportunities to learn and to help with the management of the 26 odd preserves that PCP has. So we hope we can find ways to keep her. I know she submitted a grant proposal only like 3 days ago that will partly cover her if we get funded, and we've had some generous support from our members, so we really need to be figuring out how to get more funds to keep Olivia on at a half-time basis indefinitely, because she's been really great. She'll tell us more about what she's been up to a little later. Kathy continues to produce newsletters, and we're very grateful for that, Kathy. Thank you.
Yeah, really good newsletters.
Both Kathy and Olivia contribute to our website. One of the real challenges has been trying to get our membership database modernized and our accounting system modernized so that it can be done remotely from various places and use modern technology. Julie Tuttle, who is our sort of acting treasurer at the moment, has been very helpful in trying to work that out. And we're very grateful for your help, Julie, and we will keep working on it and try and transition this to our newly elected treasurer in the near future. Right now, we're using a software platform called Atlas, and it seems to be working pretty well for us. But we'll wait and see how that works. So I have some more people in my waiting room, I have to admit. Give me a moment. I got distracted by talking to you and didn't let people in. So I'm not as good at multitasking as I ought to be, but I'm getting people in now. So we're up to somewhere between 48 and 50 of us. That's impressive. Anyway, as I was saying, we've been trying to get our background information modernized and efficient so that we can track our finances for our various purposes and track our membership database. We've been holding various events.
Maybe a home office.
Some of them in person with social distancing, some of them remotely. And Olivia will tell us about some of those. We've had some joint enterprises with the North Carolina Botanical Garden, where we've had trips to both the diabase areas north of Durham and the Sandhills area. And I thank Milo and Julie Moore for leading those. And hopefully we'll have more of those, and as well as remote events. For the first time, we had some, I think it's first time, we had interns that we supported this summer to take advantage of their knowledge as younger people at institutions of higher learning. We had superb applicants, and we brought in 2 from NC State and 1 from App State. And Olivia will tell us about what they were up to a little later today. We have a few things going on that we're thinking about right now. So the board has stuff to do. One is just to sort of prioritize what this organization is about, given we don't have infinite staff and resources. So we're thinking about what's most critical and sustainable. We're providing, I'm getting some feedback somewhere. I'm not sure where. I think it's on the phone. We're trying to provide equipment and supplies for PCP, one of our major missions. And that has included purchasing some radios so they can talk to each other while they're burning up the place and keep people safe. And there's a need for a mulch shed to be chewing up the edges of fire areas, which is a very expensive thing the states can't afford to provide right now. And we look like we're going to probably provide out of our various resources about between $30,000 and $35,000 to acquire one of those once Lesley gets that all lined up. And finally, we for some years had a fund for ginseng research, but we haven't been very effective at using it. It came to us from selling of confiscated poached ginseng. And now we have a lovely proposal before us being considered from some folks in Asheville. I noticed Jen is on the call here. I didn't notice if her colleague Alyssa is on the phone as well, but they've submitted a very helpful and useful grant proposal that the board will be looking at with care later this month and reaching some sort of final agreement with them so that we can learn about the genetics of ginseng plants, the population structure of them, and possibly repatriating them based on their genetic characteristics. So those are some of the things that have been going on in the past year. Carrie has been helping with the program. Carrie, did you want to say anything about our program committee other than what we've already said?
No, I don't think so. I'd just like to remind people that if they are not the person who's currently speaking, to please mute your microphone. We're getting some strange noises, kind of like bubbling sorts of noises coming from some folks' microphones. So
yeah, I'm getting a little bit of that coming out of a phone convert coming in. So I'm going to mute that telephone. That's 304-799-2209. And if there's a problem, they want to be unmuted, they can let me know. I think that was the major feedback.
I currently see several people who are not muted. So if everyone could just take a look, there should be a mute button at the bottom left corner of your screen. So if you could take a look there, and if that does not have a red line through it, then you are currently, your microphone is being utilized. So make sure it has a red line through it so we can make sure everyone can hear clearly.
Okay, I think we're in good shape now. I want to give the floor to Alvin for a moment or two if he'd like to tell us about the multiple activities that have been going on with him and the managing the Eastwood estate property.
Okay. Major things going on with Eastwood right now as far as maintenance of the house and properties. We have got a new lease agreement set up to go until August of 22, I think it is. And the house is major paint job on the outside is finished and paid for. There's some additional painting going on the porch that should be coming along soon to be finished. And I think we've okayed purchase of a new dishwasher. Seeing how the dishwasher that the Marcus's purchased, I think, got ruined by bad water, which was FoPC's responsibility to have good water there. And so that's been taken care of. Got a system in now that filters and treats the water. So it gets the iron out, gets the acidity right. And we've agreed to put $500 towards purchase of a new dishwasher. And they're working on that now. So
pretty much all of those expenses are covered by the rent from the property.
Right, yes, they're covered by the money that we have in account for the rent. And we've used up now essentially all the money that the Tufts left. They had $20,000 that they left to help fix the place up. And that has been used now.
All righty, thank you. I should mention we've had some challenges with taking care of our finances this year. Our previous treasurer from last year found that he didn't have time to really do what was needed to be done and fell behind on a number of things and misfiled a couple of things. That's what happens when you have a couple kids, a full-time job, and are volunteering your time with us. So it's not a criticism of him, it was just his circumstance. But fortunately, we had Mimi step in, Mimi Vanderveldt, and Mimi was wonderful. So we should all give an applause to Mimi or Marilyn Westerveld. I don't think she's here, is she, Kathy? I think she's busy taking care of her family, who has some various issues such as a newborn child and a sick daughter, etc. But she came in and essentially worked full-time on it for several months at the beginning of the year, 3 months. Got all of our finances reorganized, all of the forms that should have been gone in last year went in, and that was great. And then she stepped down around the 1st of May, and Julie Tuttle stepped in to try and figure out how to make our bookkeeping system more efficient and acting as treasurer. And she's also been wonderful. So that's been a challenge. Julie, did you want to say anything about our current finances? We seem to be in pretty good shape, but I'll let you comment if you have anything you wish to say.
Nope, nothing to say. Just that exciting things are coming by the end of the year with our updated system, and our reporting will be more standardized. And I think it's going to be a great improvement since Mimi is a superhero and we can't all be Mimi. So we're going to try to make it easier for the mere mortals.
Okay, the next thing we have to think about is election of board members. I set out a list of candidates who have agreed to serve. Did everyone see that, or do I need to pull that up and show it? If anyone's needing it, let me know. But what I thought I would do is take a moment to let the candidates that I've approached with the suggestions of people on the board to say 2 or 3 words about themselves, probably not as much as on the blurblets I sent out. We need to elect a president to take over at the end of the year, a new secretary, a treasurer, and we need 2 3-year at-large terms and a 2-year at-large term and a 1-year at-large term. The different staging has to do with when people retired from their 3-year terms. Typically, the at-large members are 3 years. So we did manage to come up with candidates for all of these. That doesn't mean we're closing the door on other candidates. We would be happy to entertain other nominations for our election here. It's just that we would need to know that those people had agreed to serve if elected. So I'm going to just introduce the people who have agreed, and then we'll see if there are any other nominations you'd like to add, either for this year or for next year's elections. So Milo Pine has generously agreed to step in for finish out the term of the current president, myself, because I agreed only to serve for a year. So he will stand for 1 year and then could stand for election for another 2 years if you wish. I should note that some of you may remember that in the past we didn't vote for officers. We voted for people on the board, and the board elected the officers. But that changed last August when we revised the bylaws. So that's why
Okay.
a little different than they had been in the past. Okay, Milo.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have to confess, I feel like I'm a little bit new to this organization. I've been on the board for only a year. I know some of you all from my previous careers, either with NatureServe or with the Tennessee Natural Heritage Program and with the Nature Conservancy. I worked for Alan there for a while. I know other people in the plant conservation and land conservation movement and community. Worked with the Botanical Garden. I'm an associate of the UNC Herbarium. So I've got some strengths in terms of knowing about these programs and how they operate and who some of the people are. Like Bob says, I'll acknowledge I agree with him that this seems to be a complex, not large, but complex organization with a lot of moving pieces, everything from house porch painting to databases to volunteer management, leading hikes, and there's all kinds of options and opportunities, and I don't have strengths in all of those areas. So I'm going to rely on, again, like Bob relied on, the institutional memory of Catherine and, Catherine and Alvin and Mimi and other people to inform him about how things worked. I'm going to need the same kind of help. I'm particularly interested, though, in trying to understand the committee structure and how we can strengthen that, make sure that everything works out right with the databases and the membership and the finances. Don't feel like I'm very strong in fundraising, so that's something else that I would need guidance and assistance with, and hopefully there's a committee that can undertake some of that work. So with all those caveats, just in the interest of full disclosure, and of course, if someone else wants to run for president, I'm happy to let them have it. Someone with more experience or more acumen in these areas where I'm not strong, then they should speak up now, or forever hold your peace. But with your support and assent, I will be glad to fill out Bob's term. And as people say nowadays, we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you, Milo. I should say Milo has a lot of experience with nonprofit sorts of organizations. It's just he's new to this one. Going down my list, we need a secretary to keep track of things for us. And Carol Ann has said that she would be willing to stand for election. Do you want to say a word or two, Carol Ann?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Carol Ann McCormick. I am brand new to the organization. I have lived in North Carolina for about 30 years now and worked at the Botanical Garden for most of that, and I'm at the UNC Urbana. So I know a lot of the names that I'm seeing in the participants. I haven't met all of you, and I am looking forward to exploring the preserves, many of which I have never been to before. So I will be an active member and board member going on for sure.
Thank you. I must say that Carol Ann is what makes the UNC Herbarium work, along with Alan. So she's really critical, and I appreciate her joining us. We need a treasurer. That's probably the most difficult job of the organization, maybe even more so than the president. But we've managed to wrestle Johnny Wilson into being a candidate. Johnny, would you like to say a word or two?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. The accent, I'm originally from South Africa, the real deep South. I came to the States in 2007 to study a PhD at NC State, where I was a NASA Earth Science Fellow, working on conservation prioritization efforts. Since then, I've worn several hats. Each of these things required me to work on budgets, get funding, fundraising, and so forth. So I've been a regular volunteer with PCP since 2010. I've written recently Africa's first conservation biology textbook. And most recently, I've worked on several biocontrol projects with NC Department of Agriculture. And more aligned to my PhD work, I'm recently started exploring opportunities with a tech startup called TerraPulse, where we're using satellite images for conservation and to see how we can make conservation and development be more friendly towards one another.
Well, thank you much for your willingness to step in and handle this tough job. Now we need some at-large members. Cindy has already served a term as an at-large member and is willing to serve again, and she provides a very helpful link to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Cindy, do you want to say a word or two?
Sure. So I'm a longtime member of the organization, but I've only served on the board for 1 year, and I'm still learning a lot and haven't been to a lot of the preserves, so I'm still very anxious about doing that. I'm about to enter my 9th year at the Museum of Natural Sciences, and in that position, I run the Naturalist Center. I'm also curating an herbarium collection at the museum that has a pretty significant proportion of rare plants. So I've been working with Carol Ann McCormick, and she's been a huge help on that. And so I'm really hoping that serving on the board will help me interface with a lot of the members who have a lot of knowledge that I need.
Well, thank you. The other member running for a 3-year term is Julie Tuttle. She's an ecologist with a PhD from UNC and a lot of experience across the state in various capacities. And she's certainly been wonderful at trying to help us get our bookkeeping system set up. Julie, do you want to say a word or two?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. I too am grateful for this opportunity. I've been, as Bob said, I've been acting as treasurer and had some really excellent, thorough training from Mimi, and I'm continuing to learn, and I've enjoyed sitting in on the board meetings over the last few months, getting to know the board members and the workings of this organization. It's been fun to learn about nonprofit accounting. In my distant past, I had a tiny bit of accounting experience, and I'm also looking forward to being an at-large member and working between now and the end of the year with Johnny Wilson, if we're both elected, to transition him to the treasurer position and to finish transitioning us to the new software system. And other than that, I've been here in North Carolina since 2005. I'm an ecologist and biogeographer. I came here to work on my PhD at UNC during that time, and since then, as Bob said, I've worked, as an ecologist and teacher and everything from surveying natural areas that were being considered for funding for conservation, at least one of which I know did become part of a plant conservation preserve, to more recently doing more GIS, computer-based modeling of for local wildlife connectivity modeling and mapping for conservation.
Thanks, Julie. The next candidate is Matt Estep, who is running for a 2-year term because that's the nature of the niche. He's on the faculty at App State and has been a long-term contributor to our programs and activities, including speaking at various events and being a preserve manager at Tater Hill. So I welcome Matt, who would also bring us some background in plant genetics, which we're a little short on our board.
Howdy, folks. My name's Matt. I think I've met a bunch of you on different hikes associated with the Friends of Plant Conservation, but this is my first meeting, and I've not really been involved in the workings of this organization before. But I am excited to volunteer some time and kind of help try and push the mission forward. I am a plant geneticist. I'm not a very good botanist, although I do try. I more or less play with DNA and try and use that to better understand how we can manage some of those rare populations. I'd be really excited to serve for a few years and see how that goes. Thank you.
Great. And the last one on our list is Chris Bowling, who has been participating in various ways with this organization for quite a while and has worked with other groups over in the Charlotte area, such as the Catawba Lands Conservancy and their Audubon Society. So Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Chris Bowling. I know I've met several of y'all before and participated in some of the events. I do live in the Charlotte area. I'm originally from Florida, been up here for 30 years almost now. I volunteered at Red Lair and with the Catawba Lands Conservancy and some other properties for the plant conservation program and just have a lifelong love of nature and getting outdoors. And I have been recently volunteering and working with the local chapter of the Audubon Society, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I thank everybody.
All right, well, thank you. Those are the people who've agreed to run, but we would be happy to open the floor to other nominations or suggestions for who we ought to nominate next year. So please send me any additional comments for next year. And do we have any additional nominations for this year?
Bob, this is Lesley. I don't have any nomination suggestions, but I wanted to ask you to just double check that we don't have anyone waiting in the waiting room before we get to the stage of voting.
It looks for some reason like John Wilson is suddenly becoming the waiting room.
We realized we couldn't both vote.
Oh, okay. Well, he gets to vote for himself. Thank you for telling me to look over there. Now we have 52 people here, and I have put together a poll, which I'm going to flip up, and each of you can vote for a candidate or other or not, and then submit your poll, and we'll see what happens. So I think I've formatted this correctly, but here's your poll. And so go through and check off those that you want to vote for, and submit your poll. Can you all see it? Anybody not see it? Okay, well.
My name is spelled M-I-L-O, but still.
Did I screw it up? I apologize, Milo.
I know it's too many I's, too many Y's, but just so you know, you're voting for M-I-L-O, Pine.
Okay, well, I could
It's
go into
P-Y-N-E,
that,
but
I won't.
M-I-L-O. Anyway, so I should vote for myself. Anyway, thank you.
No, I think any votes cast for MYLO are flawed ballots that ought to be thrown out.
And we want everybody to have someone checking to make sure they really did it. So we need a additional signature for
I think this balloting in this manner covers the motion that nominations be closed.
Anyone disagree with nominations closed? You can write in anybody you want here for other, so or tell us who it is, so you don't have to vote for these people.
I second that the nominations are closed.
Okay, I will record. I think I can record this and check to make sure that the people who voted were indeed legitimate. Johnny, did you have a comment?
My submit button is not working.
It won't work until you filled out all of them. So if you got to slide down, there's
Oh, I see. There are more. Okay. Yep. Sorry.
Okay, we've had 36 of 52 people vote. You don't have to vote, especially if you're not a member. We're up to 38. And I'll give you a few more moments and then we'll close the poll. 39. We have 39 of our 52 participants have voted. I guess I haven't voted, but I can add mine later. Okay.
Those on the phone won't be able to vote.
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, we're up to 40. We'll give it a few more moments. There aren't too many on the phone. So let's see. I'm just seeing how many. I only see one telephone at the present time. 2 telephones at the present time. Yeah, if you're not a member, don't vote, and I'll validate this later just so we know how many votes we have. Okay, is everyone ready? Anyone want me to wait a little longer, or shall we end the poll? I'm going to end the poll if I don't hear an objection in the next 10 seconds. Okay, I will share the results. Here are the results. So everybody who voted for one of the candidates except the president, where we have some unknown Milo, but we're all set. So I'm going to close that down and move on with the agenda. This concludes the first part of the meeting where we're just giving you a summary of what's going on and has gone on. In other words, a business meeting. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up for the business meeting before we move on? Okay. Now we get to the giving out of awards, an annual event that we like to take advantage of. The awards committee this year was chaired by Janet. Janet, did you want to say a word or two before we jump into this? I don't hear Janet. Yeah, I see her. She's
Yeah, good. It was a very easy selection process. And we have two folks that we would like to congratulate and thank you so much for your service. And one is Kathy Schlosser for Outstanding Service Award this year. And you're not going to be able to read that.
Okay, well, let's pause for a minute. I would have to say that it's hard to come up with anyone more worthy of an award in this organization than Kathy. She's been sort of the person who's contributed most to the success of this organization. She's served in various roles, like being a secretary in 2010 and 2011, and a vice president in 2012, 2013, and 2014, and president in 2015, 16, and 17. And she currently chairs our advisory committee, and she writes our newsletter, and she runs our website, and she serves on various committees. And that has allowed her to also be our institutional memory, so that when I need to know how anything should work or has worked or should be changed, she's the first person I consult. So she truly is deserving of our Outstanding Service Award. Thank you, Ken. We will get you your document in due course. Thank you, Janet, for that. And now, did you say we have another Outstanding Service Award?
And we do, for Mimi Westervelt. Thank you, Mimi. When you have seamlessly put together the financial records that were in a disarray, and you managed to pull all of that together, and you were able to step in during the interim process and serve, and thank you. So I
don't believe she's here with us because she's...
Yeah, I'm sorry, she's absent.
Yeah, she's taking care of a newborn grandkid and also worrying about a daughter who's been very sick. So she has more important things than awards on her mind. But gosh, she's so worthy. She served as treasurer for 2 years, 17 and 18. She became treasurer again on short notice and saved our butt, as it were, this past year. She has an incredible depth of understanding and dedication to the organization. She's helped train our subsequent treasurers. I'm sure Julie really has benefited immensely from her. So we're incredibly grateful. Let's see, you want to read the document or show it, Janet?
To Mimi, in recognition of your tireless dedication to the mission of the Friends of Plant Conservation, including serving as treasurer in 2017 and 2018, and you were interim treasurer in 2020. Her deep commitment to organizing and maintaining the complex financial records of the organization defies description, and we're so appreciative of your service.
Oh, thank you. So those are our standard awards, standard in the sense we don't give them very often, only a couple times before, but they're certainly worthy. But we have one more award to present. Janet?
And lastly, to Kathy, honorary member for 2020.
We have had in the past one other, as best I recall, honorary member. To my thinking, this is the highest award we can give. Someone who's really contributed so much that we make them a member essentially for life and keep celebrating what they've done. The only other person that I recall being an honorary member is Nancy Stewart. And if we had to pick one person to give this award to, it surely should be Kathy. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. You have to let me say something.
I would be delighted.
Okay, first and foremost, well, thank you all of you. Next, This doesn't mean I have to keep doing the newsletter, does it?
We will accept any contributions you make to us, but we will not hold your feet to the fire on anything.
And then third, thank you for all of the kind words too, especially you, Bob. I know you like to refer to me as the institutional memory. We do have a couple of others here who have an institutional memory. Paul Hosier among them. Paul was our second president. So he has quite a memory too, if you can get him off the trails long enough to ask him questions. But I also want to say that I think I gained more from being a member of this organization than I ever gave, including meeting some incredible people across the state. Our members, our board members, people in agencies that we have partnered with. They're just amazing people. And the greatest thing, the thing I enjoy the most is every time I get involved in any kind of a project, I'm learning. And that means more to me than just about anything. I think I've met most of you who are on the call or the meeting today. There are a few that I have not, and since I'll be retiring, I hope that I will meet you out on volunteer activities. Thank you so much, each and every one of you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I just can't figure out how to say enough. Well, it is now time to move on to the main part of our program. And Carrie, would you like to introduce the people, being that you organized our program for us and our official program committee chair?
Sure. So first off today, we're going to hear from Lesley Starke. She's the program director of the North Carolina Plant Conservation Program, and she's going to enlighten us about the program's recent projects and activities. Lesley, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that so many of you could join us today, even if we have to meet at such a great distance. In fact, maybe it gave the opportunity for more of you to join us that wouldn't normally make it. Matt mentioned that he got to join us without having to make the long drive. I saw Jenny Stanley is with us today, so I imagine that made it a lot easier for her too. But for all of you, whether you would have made it in person or not, thanks for being here. So the first thing I wanted to do is just talk about some staffing changes that have happened since last year. This time last year, we had a lot of changes, and we were spending a good bit of 2019 refilling empty positions. So you met Catherine Collada last year. She had started, I think, the week before, or maybe 2 weeks before we had our annual meeting last year. So she's just completed or finished up her first year with PCP. I'm super excited for another good year. We also brought on board Lori Wright, who Bob mentioned earlier. She is in Nancy Stewart's position. For those of you who knew Nancy, she is essentially our ginseng coordinator. She also is our administrative assistant and helps with all the things that it takes to keep PCP running, which is many things. And she's also our critical link for helping keep FoPC's mail and finances that come to our office in good order. So some of you may have spoken with her as you've renewed your memberships and correspondence like that. So Lori started with us last December. She's getting close to finishing her first year with us. She's not here with us today, but she is a great asset to our program. Our last permanent position vacancy that we filled just the end of this June is Jeff Austin, who I believe is here with us today. I was going to let him introduce himself briefly. He's our plant ecologist. And Jeff, if you're able to unmute yourself and say hello to everybody, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? I hope so.
Yep.
Yeah, as Lesley said, I'm the new plant ecologist with PCP. I'm really excited to be here. I came from Virginia, from the Natural Heritage Program in Virginia as an operations steward, running the preserves in Northern Virginia. Had a lot of fun working there for the past 7 years. But I'm excited to come down here and, provide my experiences and expertise to the PCP program. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, welcome. There's a long history of Virginia stealing our good botanists. It's good to get even and get a good one back. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say it was a completely fair hiring process, but the fact that we could steal one back was not lost on me at all. Bringing Jeff on board felt fair, or at least getting toward fair. And so that kind of rounds back out PCP's core staff out of the Raleigh office. We also have 4 temporary field technicians. Most of you have heard about Miller NHL, who are dedicated folks out toward the coast, in the coastal plain. They spend most of their time at our Boiling Spring Lakes and Hog Branch Ponds preserves, our largest land holdings out in far, far east near Wilmington. But so they don't often make it as far as the Piedmont. So many of you might not have met them, but they are helping us get our burning goals accomplished at our 2 preserves I just mentioned. And their help is just absolutely necessary. So it's wonderful to have them. We also, since this summer, have had both Olivia Dannemiller, who you'll hear from today, working with PCP part-time in addition to FoPC part-time. So she is now 100% plugged in with us. She was from her Asheville base. She's able to help us keep our projects in our mountain bogs to the far southern mountains, moving along at a quicker speed than those of us traveling from Raleigh are able to do. So that's really, really wonderful. And then Fisher Steins joined us in the Piedmont area. He's still an NC State student, so he's primarily helping us at our Durham preserves part-time. And many of you met him. He presented last year at the annual meeting about his research work he was doing at Red Lair. So he does help us at that preserve as well on occasion. So it's feeling really nice to have quite a bit of help at PCP once again, even though this year, of course, was different for all the obvious reasons. With so many of us and so much space to operate at good, safe distances, we've been able to keep the show on the road. Now, in terms of projects, a lot of the things we worked on this year have been more or less continuations of things that you've heard me speak about in the past. I realize there might be some new folks joining us today that haven't heard me speak about them necessarily in the past, but I'm not going to rehash those necessarily today. What I wanted to do is tell you something I'm really excited about. It has been ongoing for a long time, but probably this year's biggest accomplishment is getting the protected plant list updates ready and out for public comment. That just happened on October 1st. Those of you that don't follow the Rare Flora listserv might not have seen that message that I sent out there to announce this, but going from, I think, as far back as 2017, our board, the Plant Conservation Board, and the scientific committee that advises them have been working at this process. It's not something we do quickly, and it's finally completed and it's finally out for public comment. So I wanted to give you a bit of an update on that. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to present you a quick PowerPoint presentation.
Tell me if you have any difficulty with screen sharing. It should work.
Okay, let me just get myself organized. All right, so you should be seeing that by now.
We are.
All right, so for a little bit of background, what this is all about. So in 2008, I'm going to go back a little bit in history, the Plant Conservation Program updated their listing criteria and the process that they use. Really, the scientific committee did this to reestablish how they would regularly update the protected plant list, that it be a defensible process that was repeatable and relied a little less on just expert opinion that might, turn over or be thinner in places. We wanted a process that, like I said, could be repeated at any time, whether you could reach those same folks or not. And those that process is pulled from existing listing criteria that other experts have put together. So it really stands on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, working from guidelines developed by NatureServe, as it says here, and the IUCN. And there end up being 3 main criteria that go into this process, and that is the rarity, the short-term trends, and the threats of each species. So I'm just going to walk through those a little bit to give you a bit of an understanding of what this looked like. I'm saying this is the process we went for the most recent update to the protected plant list, which was published in 2010. It's the one we're still working from. This recent process has been a repeat of the process that was developed for this last round, but I'm just going to walk you through it a little bit. So for rarity, what that means is essentially a count or a tally count of how many populations or really element occurrences there are for that species in the state of North Carolina. And we rely heavily on the Natural Heritage Program for their data to understand this and have one equal playing field for assessing how many occurrences we're talking about. So they are the data keepers for all that. And those of you that have heard people talking about sending in rare plant data forms, if you've maybe heard me beating this drum before, if it's ever made you wonder if that's actually important, believe me, it is. This is one of the uses of that data set that makes a big impact to have updated data. So anyway, rarity is about number of populations, but more specifically, we're looking at the viable element occurrences. And so the Heritage Program ranks all element occurrences. You can think of them as populations. And they have a lettering system of A, B, C, down to E for at least extant populations. And for this assessment process, we're only considering those that are A, B, or E ranked, which is equivalent to having excellent viability, good viability, or at least verified extant. Those missing letters of C and D are essentially non-viable populations, and we're not considering those in this process. The short-term trend is essentially a historical trend over the last 10 years or say 3 generations. This set of data is also generated by the Heritage Program through a process that they share with NatureServe. And it really is just assessing at different levels the decline or possible increase of populations for the species in our state. Of course, decline is more common for rare species than increases. So you'll see we have several subsets of decline based on how severe that decline is. You might also be stable and have an E ranking. So now we're talking about how many populations and how they're doing. Are they just there? Are they getting better? Or are they getting worse? And then the last criterion is threat. So for every species, the committee has worked through a big old data set to establish what the top 3 threats are for that species. For each threat, we also break that down into these 3 components. So how severe is that threat? Is it causing complete loss of populations, or is it maybe just harming them some? For the scope, we're talking about how regional that threat may be. Is it something affecting the species statewide, or is it just in one location, or something along those lines? And these high, moderate, and low rankings help us narrow down what we really mean by this threat affecting a species. And then the immediacy, how long until the threat is operational? High means it's current, it's happening right now. Maybe it's something we foresee in the next couple of years, or maybe in the next couple of decades. So for each species, we have these sets, or this information recorded. Now, stepping the other direction for a second, I'll remind you to get onto the protected plant list, you have to meet one of 3 criteria, or one of 3 categories, either endangered, threatened, or special concern. Those are our legal categories that actually impart protection under state law and our rules and regulations. The special concern category is broken into 2, vulnerable and then historical. You might also go through this process as a species and end up with one of the other outcomes, and that might be data deficient. So we might be working through assessing all this information and realize that we don't have enough information to really make a good judgment. And so those species, whether we believe that they are perhaps underreported, perhaps they are really difficult to identify, or they occur in really inaccessible habitats. So we fear that it looks like we have not very many populations, but really we believe that they're underreported. That might be a type of data deficiency. Taxonomic questions might cause us to put another species into the data deficient category, but that's a place we hold species that we're not comfortable enough moving forward with a legal listing. And then if you see here, the last option you might come to is significantly rare, which is a category that you'll see in the Heritage Program's rare plant list that does not impart legal protection, but that does at least recognize that a species is rare enough to be tracked and a close eye kept. So we currently have 419 legally protected species in North Carolina, of plants anyway. Most of them are vascular plants, but this quick table, I've taken this from the rare plant list that the Heritage Program publishes every 2 years. Their next edition is due out in November or December. And so you'll be able to see these numbers in the front pages of those books to track that change over time if you're interested. Also on this, on the far right of this table where it says US status, that's referring to federally listed species. Just to remind you, all federally listed species in North Carolina are within our protected plant list. They don't sit separately, they're included and demarcated as federally listed. If you're ever trying to find one of those in our list and curious where they stand. So to not get too into it, I just wanted to show you, once we establish all those criteria for each protected plant, we essentially, like I said, have three measures: how rare it is, what the threats are, and what the trends are. So for the rarity, we have 3 matrices that function the same, but are broken down for a number of populations. So for species that have 1 to 5 populations of good viability in the state, we would assess their threats and trends on this table. And so the main thing I want you to see is that if I take the threat assessment and have any threat between extreme threat to not so bad at a G, or a trend of extreme decline to even stable, increasing, or unknown, no matter where I fall on this table, the species has 1 to 5 populations, we're saying it's imperiled enough to be listed. Every cell on this table has a legal listing outcome. The next table is for 6 to 19, and we just keep going up in numbers of populations for those species that are a little less rare. And the main takeaway here is that with more populations, there's more cells here that have SR, and that's that significantly rare, which means the outcome is to not be listed. So all that to say, for each species, we get all that data together, we come up with these values, and then have a repeatable process to assess changes in threats, changes in trends, and then see what the outcome is. And then here's our last of 3 matrices for those species with 20 or greater populations. You'll notice it takes pretty extreme threats and pretty extreme decline in trends to be listed with so many populations. Most of the outcomes on this table are significantly rare, recognizing that species with a good number of viable populations probably aren't that imperiled relative to the others. So what have we been doing from 2017 to 2019, using those Heritage Program data, the full data set being 909, the committee decided that re-reviewing every single species in their data set was not warranted, and so instead came up with this subset of species criteria to determine which ones should be evaluated for this update. The basic idea being, if not much has changed since 2010, then there's not a whole lot to review. So these are the criteria. Any species that was named or tracked since the last review wasn't reviewed, and so therefore should be high on the list. So we looked at those. Rediscovered historical species, of course, needed to be evaluated. Their situation had changed. And then we have these 3 categories, which basically reflect that for a certain number of occurrences, how much change would warrant re-review. So we came up with that whole list and then started going through them. So here are the updates. So I told you before, or reminded you, that we have 419 species on the protected plant list currently. What we're proposing is 74 additions and 26 deletions. That 74 additions, I don't know how you respond to that when you first see it, but I could imagine you might think the sky is falling. This is a whole bunch of species about to blink out. What in the world is happening? That's not really what's happening. Certainly there are some species that have gone into further decline. That's a small proportion of these additions, but 57 of these 74 are actually species that were previously data deficient that we were able to identify as targets for needing new observations and new data. Beat the bushes, got some botanists to get out there and get their data sent in. And by including those updates into the Heritage Program data set, we realized that we had enough information to move forward, no longer consider these species data deficient. And lo and behold, after review, determined they met the criteria for listing. So don't let that 74 species give you chills. It's actually a success story. It's pulling a lot of species out of a bucket that they had really no traction for any movement one way or the other without that extra data. So I'm actually really quite excited about that, although I acknowledge it might be a bit of a shock. The deletions are also a bit of a success story. It means that we're identifying populations that are either less threatened than they were, or have had increases in population size, or even new populations discovered. So that's also good. And then just for fun, I'm going to show you a couple of these updates. It's certainly just a few. So for species that were newly named or newly discovered in the state, we had 8 of those. 5 are suggested for listing. Some of these we've seen coming for a while, and the day has come. So like Radford St. John's wort, Marshallia legrandii, we've been talking about that species for a good long time. It's been now named. All the data are in, wasn't that many. Still, they're in, evaluated, and now officially proposed for listing in North Carolina. We had 51 newly tracked species since 2008, which was quite a lot, I thought. Of those 51, 17 are suggested for listing. These really do span a good bit of space. I'll point out that it's all types of listings. Several of these are endangered, a few threatened, and in fact, one special concern historical. For rediscovered historical species, these are success stories, certainly, or at least uplifting stories. We had 6 rediscovered species that we've been holding on our list since 2010 as special concern historical, thinking they were gone. Folks getting out there, doing botanical surveys and getting that data sent in have helped us understand that, in fact, we do still have these in the state, and how great that is. So for the threats summary, many of you have heard me give these sorts of rundowns in the past for the data that we have represented in the 2010 current protected plant list. Since we have the top 3 threats of every species on that list, we're able to pull those out, combine them, and say, what is the biggest threat to our plants, what are the top 3 threats, or something like that. Here, 5. So I've done that for this re-evaluation, and it looks like this. Essentially, incompatible management is impacting 290 of what would be 467 of our proposed listed species. Development, i.e. habitat loss, is a heavy hitter. Hydrology changes is obviously a big one. This helps us remember that an awful lot of our protected plant lists or our imperiled species are associated with wetlands, and hydrology changes certainly alter their habitats. And so this is a little bit different looking from the last round that you would have seen. So I just wanted to give you that bit of an update. But I'm also going to dig in. Incompatible management is subsuming fire suppression and woody succession, which had been pulled out separately before. So you might remember me saying many, many times in the past that fire suppression is the second biggest threat to plants in North Carolina. That's still practically true. I'm just showing you here that going forward, I think it will be important for us to reevaluate how we identify these threats and maybe bring those into a more structured format, perhaps follow threat categorizations posed by others. And so we didn't do that in this process, but I think as we get ready, once this is done, we'll almost immediately need to turn around and start doing the next round of review, because that's how long these things take. That'll be a big to-do item for me, is to make sure that we're using one set of threat titles so that we can really compare apples to apples with these partial reviews going forward. A few more highlights. So Venus, I just picked things that I thought people might be interested to hear. Venus flytrap, we're proposing uplisting to threatened from special concern vulnerable due to increased poaching pressure since the last review process. So we're not necessarily feeling that the species has dropped so many populations or dropped so many viable populations since last time, but that threat increase, going back to that matrix analysis, did suggest to us a warranted uplisting to threatened. Just in case you hadn't heard, the species is also under review with the Fish and Wildlife Service for potential federal listing. Sandhills pixie moss, we're proposing relisting to threatened, again, due to an increased threat, not so much a population rarity adjustment. The species is restricted to area around Fort Bragg and an awful lot of populations on Fort Bragg. So military training activities and damages incurred by that are pushing this species to go back onto our list. It had been listed once upon a time. It came off in the last review. And after reassessing the threats with the botanist staff at Fort Bragg specifically, we're moving forward to relist this as threatened. Lindera subcoriaceae, we're talking about relisting this species as well, another one that had been on our list in the past. It most recently came off after the last round of review, but this one, due to a rapid decline in trend that's being noted with updated data at the Heritage Program, we're proposing relisting. This is also under review by Fish and Wildlife Service for possible federal listing. And Heller's rabbit tobacco, we're proposed listing this to endangered due to severe losses of viable populations. Golden seal, we're talking about relisting this to special concern vulnerable, again, declining trend, one that was previously considered stable. More data coming in, speaking with more folks that have observed populations that hadn't been updated in a long time, push this species to go back on our list. Southern Appalachian purple pitcher plant. This is proposed for listing as endangered, another one being reviewed by Fish and Wildlife Service for potential federal listing as well. And then sweet pine sap, we're talking about delisting. Here's an example of a species going from special concern vulnerable to just significantly rare. We anticipate the Heritage Program may continue to track this species, but it would not have state protections as proposed. Another one coming off the list, Virginia spiderwort. We're talking about moving that from threatened to significantly rare. Next steps. I'm just going to say that, I mentioned before how important it was to bring species kind of out of the dark, out of that data deficient category, to have a proper opportunity to be evaluated. And from 2010 to today, we had 396 data deficient species through this reevaluation of the Heritage Program database. We found 188 met the review criteria of having enough updates to warrant re-review. Of those 188, we found that 62 were no longer data deficient and 57 of those were proposed for listing. So this is how it works. Getting that data into the database allows us to update these species and get a better handle on how they're really doing, because that's a huge number. Of the 900 track species I was talking about before, 396 is data deficient is far too many. Remaining data deficient species, a lot of them are non-vascular, and they've been in a bit of a holding pattern because we have, generally speaking, a lot less expertise for that group relative to vascular species. So it's going to take a little bit of a different approach, I think, to really make as big of a dent in our data deficient category on this next round. So those of you out there that are interested in taking a crack at being part of the process, know that we'll need folks that are particularly interested in non-vascular species. So from here, like I mentioned before, our public comment period is live. The proposed list is in the North Carolina Register right now. We'll be taking public comments through November 30th, and our board will evaluate any comments that come in. Once those have been addressed, we're anticipating our proposed effective date would be February 1st next year. This has been a very long process, and I'm super, super excited that we've made it this far.
Okay, well, thank you.
This is Alan Weekly. If I could just comment really briefly, the public comment, I've been involved in this listing process since the 1980s, and back a few decades ago, the public comment period usually went by with essentially no comments. That has changed to a degree, and I expect there will be comments, and there may well be negative comments about adding any species to the list from a kind of anti-environmental protection sort of point of view. And I would just encourage folks who are, who support the PCP and the Natural Heritage Program and the conservation of these species, to take a look at the list and consider making some comments of your own, because I think it will be helpful to know that there's support for listing in case there is a significant number of comments that oppose additional listing. So it's not a sure thing that that this will go through in an uncontroversial manner in this day and age.
Okay, Alan, is it still a situation where if there's a number of negative comments that rules review can kick this back to the legislature?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about the procedures. I think Lesley, you may want to jump in. I think, the idea was that the comments coming in would be sort of monitored as they're coming in, so we'd have an idea about whether there's, whether there is going to be controversy or an issue, or whether it's going to be pretty straightforward. But if there is a considerable amount of comment, particularly of a negative nature, I'm not really sure where that then goes. I mean, essentially, I think it goes to the board for their decision, but whether that gets kicked to the legislature or something, I'm not sure.
It's been a while since I've been involved with that, but Rules Review Commission used to look at things like that. And at one point, they could actually kick things back to the legislature for them to say yes or no to go forward.
Yeah,
that may have changed.
Sort of a, oh, this isn't straightforward and the legislature needs to re-enter the matter.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the main thing that the register mentions is that there's a more limited time period at the beginning that any individual can request a hearing. That deadline, I'm looking for, my computer's slow to bring it up. That deadline is October 16th. And so that is listed in the register for demanding a public hearing. Otherwise, we're reviewing comments as they come in. It does say that, there's a little bit more information about the procedure for subjecting a proposed rule to legislative review. And it's if an objection is not resolved prior to the adoption, then there can be, pushing that forward and through the Rules Review Commission. But I think that's only, as you're saying, Alvin, if that back and forth process is unsuccessful.
Okay. So hopefully that won't happen.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lesley. I guess we'll turn this back over to Carrie.
So thanks, Lesley, for all of your hard work with that. That does sound like there are a lot of promising things going on. And Alan, I appreciate your comments for those of us who may actually be supportive of these moves to make our comments known so that we can potentially outweigh any negative comments that come in from people who would prefer that that species not be listed for protection. I appreciate that.
I wonder, we're about 20 minutes behind schedule here. Maybe we should plan to have Julie's presentation and then insert our break period after that, just to space things out appropriately.
Okay. So Julie Moore will be speaking to us next. She is on the advisory board for the Plant Conservation Program. She recently retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Washington, D.C. She was with the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program for 12 years before migrating south for conservation work in the piney woods of South Georgia and Mississippi. She's enjoying being a botanist again and has served as board member for the Friends of Plants Conservation, was president of the Triangle Land Conservancy, and a founding board member of the Longleaf Alliance and Southern Conservation Partners. So today she's going to be talking to us about partnerships, cultivating existing ones and growing ones. Are you there with us, Julie? Julie, if you're there, we can't hear you.
Am I unmuted now?
There you are. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I have to figure out the next step here to be able to share my screen with the short PowerPoint that I have. And I was hoping we'd take a break so I could pick my assistant here to help me. But tell me if anybody can tell me what I should do to share the screen. Got it. Okay. I think I got it.
Excellent.
My technical assistant is on the scene here, and I'm there to open that.
Okay, I think we click on that and we go down here to share.
All right. Now, how can I close this side out, maybe?
There we go.
Maybe you can.
There we go. Thank you so very much.
It's my pleasure.
I haven't kept up with the technology of the new world, and I'm learning very slowly. Lesley asked me to talk today a little bit about some of the new partnerships that are going on. And part of the reason to talk about it is because partnerships have become so much more important in today's world of accomplishing conservation objectives, and for a lot of other parts of life too. And I think sometimes we don't reach out as actively as we could to encourage people to work with us. Sometimes, but the other part of it is, if you have skills and talents, and Milo mentioned different skills and talents that he has and all of us have, is to really volunteer and step forward to do some of the things that are that you are able to do and that you have some experience with. You don't always have to wait to be asked. I'll go through a few of the things that have been happening this past year, a whole year, not just in this odd period we're in now, but I want to start talking about my favorite plant that reminds me of many conservation needs is the Venus flytrap. And we got to working with the North Carolina Botanical Garden this last year and with trying to get a license plate. As you can see, the model that was developed by an artist working with the Botanical Garden. And already the Plant Conservation Program had been working on this idea in the past. But by partnering with the Botanical Garden, it really did whole effort move forward. We all worked hard to get the, what was it, 800 or 500 people had to sign up and actually write checks that they would be willing to buy a license plate. But right now, we're not moving too far with that because of, I believe, as I understand it, Lesley, it's stuck in the legislature somewhere, and that it's still active. It's just not moving forward as fast as we would like it to be. And some people need new license plates. We had some good times this year at participating in various events. That was Bug Fest, and then there was Darwin Day, and I'm not sure which this event was from, but Alvin's there and I'm there, and all kinds of people came to these two events, and we were able to have a good display from the Friends of Plant Conservation and also promote Venus flytrap license plate. If you look at that table, you can also see some Venus flytrap hands that Dale Suter developed, and we've been able to use those to really attract attention, and many people paid attention, particularly to Lesley looking so lovely in her Venus flytrap suit. And I think we need to order flytrap suits for more of us so we can do more with the conservation of Venus flytraps. It's a particular species that we've all known for a long time is in decline. And I think in Lesley's good summary of how you look at threats, the numbers of this species may not have gone down tremendously, but the threats are increasing beyond belief around that limited area where we have fly traps around Wilmington, that's 75 miles. I was just down that way recently, and it was amazing to see how many new threats were on the landscape. And certainly we always have the issue about poaching, but now we have drainage issue, anti-burning issues, and just housing developments. In the Croatan National Forest, just last week, I drove through there, and the number of new houses backed up to some of the best habitats was really frightening, and it's also going to affect how successful burning will be in the future. But when we finished with the fly trap, it seemed like a natural partnership with the Botanical Garden was to do field trips. And we came up with 3 field trips that we wanted to do to preserves, Plant Conservation Program preserves, and really worked very hard to pick ones that have different themes, different partners, different parts of the state. And particularly with the red layer, and since Bob Pete is the expert on that area, our first field trip was going to be to that site. Unfortunately, it was canceled because of the virus issue. And we'll have to do that. We hope we can reschedule that for this spring. The Botanical Garden took care of the registrations for this event, and all these 3 field trips we had planned. And we were going to share the income, a little bit of income that came from these people contributing for these field trips. So that's happened recently, I think, and I don't know what the percentage was, but we had such low attendance at these trips because we had to be so careful because we went ahead with the next 2 trips. So I've included several photographs from those trips to tell you all that we had them and that we had a really good time. And the first one was in early August, just an absolutely horrible time of year to have a field trip, but that's when the lily is blooming. Our fear was this year, unlike last year, August 1st, there were, well, let's put it this way, July 28th, there were none blooming. And we thought we were going to have a field trip with no plants to look at. Well, at the last minute, they came right up. And this is on the Eastwood Preserve. And Jeff Marcus, who actually lives on the preserve and works for the Nature Conservancy in the Sandhills, was out there checking every day and walking the whole power line, trying to find lilies. And we really did have a great showing that day. And on the boardwalk there, across the wet seepage area, is Bruce Sorey. And Bruce Sorey was the co-leader of the field trip. He and Jeff did a great job. I was there to back up a little bit on that. But Bruce was the one who worked so much to get this species named as Lilium pyrophyllum. And you can see the small range, the tight range on this species. It was a lovely, hot and miserable day, and the lily was in its full glory. And you can see how tall this lily is. And if you notice on the left-hand picture, if you look carefully, you can also see that's a great big poison sumac above it. So we did have to make sure that as we were enjoying the lily so much, we didn't get our hands or faces into the poison sumac. But it really indicates what a wet seepage area this is, a very specialized sandhills habitat where this lily goes. The first time I saw this plant must have been close to 30 years ago. And the power line had been mowed occasionally, but the plant itself was almost 7 feet tall. It had grown so tall to get above all that evergreen shrubbery that you can see in that picture. There's an adjacent property that does also have a few lilies that is going to now be in conservation status as a major donation of a former development site that's going to be a nature preserve. And we've just gotten the plan out for that. And that used to have, and we think still does have the lilies on that property, along with a lot of other fascinating plants that are characteristic of this seepage area. This one is unique. I don't know how many of you all have been to Eastwood, but the power line is very important here because that's the mowing of the power line in the past was what kept the habitat suitable for the lily and a lot of other species. So there we are, a small group, taking a look not only for the lily, but everything else along that route. We're all masked and we're trying to stay appropriate distances apart. So part of the drill that the Botanical Garden developed was really to remind us of the safety factors, and then we all had to agree to pay attention to them so we could go ahead and have these trips. There's all kinds of things to see under that power line. The day we were there, the the orange fringe orchid was in full bloom, and the pitcher plants were looking great. There was plenty to see, and there was actually something we didn't anticipate finding. Outside the seepage area, we actually found a Carolina lily, and it just goes to show some of these sites you think you know so well, new things do show up occasionally. And the fact that it was blooming not 25 feet from the fire lily was a real surprise. And it'd be interesting to see if there's ever any kind of hybridization going on with that species. After we finished at the power line, we went to Weymouth Woods and to look at what well-maintained longleaf stands look like, and had our lunch there and introduced some people who'd never been to Weymouth Woods to another great preserve. Cooperation is essential in getting a lot done with these preserves, and this one is a particularly sensitive site. Soon after, I think about 3 weeks after we met to have a look at the lily, Duke Power reinitiated contact with various people in the sandhills, and fortunately, Lesley was there to insist that they start including PCP in their meetings about how they want to treat these power lines, particularly this one with the lily. And it's scary. I have to say, it's really frightening to see these big utility companies who want to minimize their cost of management. And in this case, what the issue is they want to use more herbicides everywhere. It's the cheapest form of management. But they do know how important this preserve is in Eastwood and other areas in the sandhills that have other extremely rare species. So that meeting was quite fascinating, and it took a long time, and they're still working on trying to get the agreements redone. Some of these agreements with Duke Power had gone back to when it was Carolina Power and Light, and a woman who'd worked for the Natural Heritage Program as an intern went to work for Carolina Power and Light, and one of the gentlemen still had the original agreement that was signed almost 30 years ago to work on these right-of-ways. In what Lesley was just telling us about the threat issue, what was it? 16% of the type of problems with these habitats is right-of-way maintenance. And I see this as only getting to be a bigger problem as different utilities, whether it's roadsides or power lines, need to minimize their management cost. Fortunately, with today's world, we can track these special sites better through computer mapping. And so whoever goes out and does the management can be alerted that there's something special there. Just because these all these men in these yellow vests higher up in Duke Power know that this preserve and other places are special doesn't mean it gets down to the people on the ground. And that's where we usually have the disconnect. But this is another form of partnership that we need to work on and to continue. And for some of you all who live near these preserves, this is another way for you to assist, is to watch what's going on there and to maybe help participate in other management alternatives. The Plant Conservation Program is going to be doing more burning here and figure out cooperatively with Duke Power how exactly the edges and the less sensitive places should be managed. But this is an interesting, you should use the word conundrum. And Lesley, I hope they will now do better at keeping in touch with you about what's going to go on there. But right-of-way management is an increasing issue, I think, throughout the nation, but particularly in a state that's becoming so much more populous as North Carolina is. Our next field trip that we just had 2 weeks ago was to a very well-known area, the dye base areas at Penny's Bend. I call it Penny's Bend because of the big turn in the river. But this time we went to places people don't usually go to. And Milo was the leader with Lesley. You see Lesley there on the left, to this site. And we had a pretty good turnout for this meeting too. And several people had been to this various sites, but very few of them had really looked at things in depth as we did that day. And I do believe that's Ed Harrison, who's on the call on the right there. And this was one of the roadside preserves. Once again, presents the problem of there's a utility line in the background, and how do you burn in habitats like this? But you can see a few flags in there to show the species of particular interest. this didn't quite work out as well as I'd hoped, but this is a big chunk of dye base. And on top of it, you see some pink flags. Well, those, I believe, Herb, are some of your all's flags for the pink coneflower. It's this rock that makes this whole area so unusual because of its mafic material that weathers to a very odd purplish gray clay with a very high pH. It can be very dry or very moist. And it's really very, I think, I remember correctly, volcanic in origin. But if you look at a geology map, this whole area around, they used to call it Stagville. Well, it's not Stagville. Gosh, what was it called? Anyway, I call it Penny's Bend. It stands out because of the geology and an incredible number of unusual species there. We weren't necessarily there in the spring to look at the coneflowers or to see much, but except this wonderful liatris. And truth to tell, it was lying down like that. I tried to reorient it, but that's not how it was that day. We had a good turnout for this trip. Everyone stayed well distanced from each other. And I think they all learned a lot about different phases of the dye-based community and all the different preserves and pieces of property there, some owned by the Corps of Engineers. The Botanical Garden manages Penny's Bend itself. Johnny Randall's involved in that. And then there's, I think there are 3 or 4 different chunks of property there that compose this greater dye base, Durham dye base area. I was pleased with these field trips because they introduced people who weren't familiar necessarily. There are certain ones on the trip who did know about the plant conservation program. There were a lot of folks who didn't know anything about it. And we had a goodly number of North Carolina Botanical Garden members. And then we had some people none of us knew. And they were, in both cases, people were quite interested. And these were really not just let's go see pretty pictures or pretty plants. Let's really learn about these sites. And that was what my objective was in getting these 3 trips set up. So sorry we couldn't do the first one. But we need to do more outings, I think, for people to make them understand the diversity of preserves that the plant conservation has, and to expose some people who we know are sympathetic to conservation to see what really the state of North Carolina is doing. I also have to say I got a terrible case of chiggers on that trip. I'm still itching. Where's the word scratching? Partnerships are really what I'm trying to talk about today. And as you all think about your neighbors and friends and other organizations you belong to, we need to think how we can all work together better. And sometimes it's with technical things like actually doing, like the Amexes do with really propagating and adding plant material. Sometimes it's removing weeds and competition or helping on a burn. But we also need help with exposure of the program. Just as Lesley was pointing out with that incredible list of species and how technical the review has been, we need to make sure that the program that was in this state, certainly those based on rare plants, that really we give them the support beyond our normal cooperators and neighbors. We need to make sure people know about this program. And that doesn't mean we need to expose the property to more use, but we need to get that support. I'm a proponent of a lot of burning, and burning is the hardest issue in these areas, and it's going to be more difficult in the future around Durham, I think. More people, more power lines, makes management more complicated. We have educational opportunities. You all may have people at your local universities or community colleges who could learn more about these programs and volunteer in some ways. And also what I was trying to do was really connect conservation groups. Sometimes we all get in our stovepipes. The Botanical Garden and the PCP are natural cooperators, just as with, I think, the Natural History Museum is another natural cooperator, but we can build other partnerships, I think, and look for those opportunities. And I'm sure some of you all are involved in organizations and educational endeavors that could benefit from learning more about the plant conservation program. I'm getting ready to give a talk in a couple of weeks at the Longleaf Alliance annual conference that unfortunately we're doing just like we're doing today. but it's talking about land trusts and how they manage land. And I do know here in North Carolina, particularly the Catawba Land Trust has been so important with the Red Layer Preserve. But we need to also work with in the various parts of the states and the mountains and the coast, coastal areas with other land trusts as managers and help them understand our management agendas. The Nature Conservancy, we can call a land trust, and they certainly are a major partner, particularly with burning, Boiling Springs Lake and other areas in the mountains too, I think, and also with getting money for some sites. But any kind of land managing organization can be very helpful, and maybe we can help them too. So what I'd like to suggest is let's all think about different ways that we can get exposure for this program, and also different ways to help this limited staff do the work they need to do. It's a hard job when you have 26 preserves from the mountains to the sea to have eyes on the ground and to have the cooperation that's necessary. So I think there's a lot we can all do maybe we haven't thought about before. And I would like to challenge all of us to come up with more ways that we can help the plant conservation program in partnerships, whether you want to go toe-to-toe with Duke Power, with some of us, or if you just want to really get help on your local road management. What could happen, I always worry about up at Penny's Bend and what happens on the roadsides up there. So I've had a great year working with the plant conservation program on different ideas, and I hope we can do more field trips, certainly get back to the Magnolia one, but we can do other things. And so please come forward and let us all know what you can do. Don't wait to be asked. Be a good volunteer. Thank you all.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much, Julie. That was fantastic.
Hey,
So,
I just want to jump in and say real quick that Julie's efforts at promoting partnerships and everything has been recognized beyond this group, that she was recently awarded the Illustrious Palustris Award from the North Carolina Longleaf Coalition, which is a distinguished award for contributions, significant contributions to longleaf conservation. And so yeah, Julie's been doing great work that's been recognized and really appreciated.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions? I think we're all ready to take a break now, aren't we?
All right, we'll take a 10-minute break, give everybody a chance to stretch their legs. It's currently 2:42. Why don't we just say we'll be reconvening at, let's say, 2:55. Give everyone a chance to get a drink and a potty break and stretch your legs and such. And we'll be back shortly to hear Lesley Starke tell us about adding plants to the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan. So see you back in a little bit.
Can I just leave it on?
Sure, just leave everything on.
let him know. Hey, Bob.
Yes.
I am on the phone with David Ferrier, and he was having trouble joining through Zoom. So I just resent him the link to the meeting. So if you see him in the waiting room, could you allow him to come in?
Certainly. I don't see anyone yet.
Okay. So he didn't see you yet, but I let Bob know.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Johnny.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right, all things considered.
Okay, bye.
So I had to step out for a minute, and I missed Julie's presentation, and I know that Venus Flytrap came up. Was there a question about the status of the license plate?
Well, she mentioned it and the fact that we really don't know when we're going to hear that it's stuck in the legislature as they're getting around to doing such things. And
Yep.
Several license plates are pending like ours.
That's right. So, yep, and we have a new primary sponsor for that, and they will ensure that it gets in front of the legislature this next session.
Excellent.
So when is the next session?
Will be March, February, March.
Cool.
Johnny,
Yes.
for those of us who opted up initially for a couple of plates, we're still in the line, right?
You are in line.
Good.
You and 750 other people are in line.
Well, that's super. I was just wondering if my money went down the drain along with everything else that seems to be going down the drain.
No, in fact, your money is safe. Well, they haven't cashed the check yet. So DMV has the check in their possession. So yes, it's your money's still safe.
All right. I just wondered where we were, but I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wrote the check, Johnny. Who wrote the check, Johnny? Was it Botanical Garden?
No, DMV has the check from the Botanical Garden.
Okay, so the Botanical Garden wrote the check to DMV.
Correct.
Because my personal check was cashed.
Correct.
So the Botanical Garden cashed my check, sent it to DMV, and that's where it is.
We cashed your check, put it in the pot with everybody else, and sent them a check for some many thousands of dollars.
Super, super. Thank you.
Bob, do you see if David Ferrier got in yet? Not yet. Okay. I guess it was asking him to sign in for some reason. Not sure why.
Oh, so I might have an answer for him, Olivia.
Okay.
It did that for me too, but you don't have to click that button. So he might need to close what he's doing and try again, and just tell him to leave that button alone, and it'll put him directly into the waiting room.
Okay. I resent him the link, so hopefully he closed everything out and is going to restart.
You might just let him know he doesn't need to click. If he clicks that extra button to sign in, it'll put him in a loop he can't get out of. He just needs to try again without that.
Okay, I'll send him another email real quick.
And Mr. President, I have a group of volunteers that I'm about to meet with for some invasive plant control in a botanical garden natural area. I'm going to need to leave the meeting, but
You just went mute.
He left.
Yeah, Johnny left the meeting. Well, it may be more important to pull out invasives than to sit and talk to us.
I was just out checking on a fig tree. Figs splitting from the moisture and all manner of insects coming into them. Must have 4 or 5 different species of paper wasp and you name it, everything else, butterflies, flies, various beetles.
Well, I think the time has rolled around. Carrie, do you think, to reconvene?
It seems like it. I see a lot of people retaking their seats, so we can go on and get going again. Bob, you might want to keep an eye on that waiting room. It looks like we had lost some participants, so people might.
Yeah, we're down to 40.
They might want to, they might be trying to log back in, so keep an eye on that. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Lesley Starke again. She's the program director for the North Carolina Plant Conservation Program. She's going to now talk to us about adding plants to the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission.
Great,
Lesley.
thanks, Carrie. All right, let me share another screen with everybody. Okay, so I don't have a ton of time to talk about a fairly big topic, so I'm going to have to go a little quickly through the background, and I apologize if this is something you're not terribly familiar with, but a little bit of background on what is the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan. This is a planning document, a conservation strategy, so to speak, published by the Wildlife Resources Commission, like Carrie just said. The first one was written in 2005. It was updated in 2015. This document is a requirement from the Fish and Wildlife Service to receive certain funding. And so there was a good carrot on the stick to get this document written for 2005. It does require an update at least every 10 years, which is how we got to 2015's update. And we're still working out of that plan at the moment. The real hope for this document, like the purpose of it, is really summarized in this great tagline of keeping common species common. The idea is reducing listing by putting proactive conservation efforts, on the ground, avoiding extirpations and extinctions by getting to them before they're so imperiled, basically. Like I mentioned, this document, this action plan, is directly tied to federal funding, specifically the state wildlife grants. And sort of the unit of measure, the real currency, so to speak, of this document is the list of species of greatest conservation need, these SGCNs. Importantly, these are only fauna. That will make a little bit more sense, or the importance of that I'll get to in a second. But even if it's just fauna, this document is quite comprehensive. It's supposed to be guiding the conservation strategy for the state, not just for the Wildlife Resources Commission, but really for all of us that are working on conservation efforts, to have some good guidance and highlight areas for partners to come together and work on larger projects than any one of them might do themselves, and to help us prioritize what needs to be done. So to compare the North Carolina plan to the others in the state and territories, get this national overview, I wanted to show you that although ours is fauna only, that's not true for every state and territory. There are actually 32 plans out there that include plants as those species of greatest conservation need. That the point of that is that means that those SGCNs are just as suitable for funding projects as, something like a woodpecker or a turtle or something like that. They're at equal value, and that means that state wildlife grant opportunity is spreading a lot further to have different taxonomic groups included. Another 18% of the plans out there across the nation include plants, but as an alternate list. So they're not is sort of tacked on with, maybe authority from a different agency than did the wildlife fauna species review. And then there's another 50% of plans where plants are not included at all, like North Carolina's. So how some states, considered they would include plants perhaps is through these prioritized habitats. Instead, this was an idea that, not that anyone sat down and said plants don't deserve to be in these plans, but there was, still you had to prioritize somewhere. And this was an idea of covering plants in a different way. They were perhaps going to be included through each plan done on its own, but as that state's prioritized habitats. So if you look at this map, the states in green, well, the states, and then in the legend here, you can see territories in green represent plans that habitats were prioritized. They are a section of that plan, and they identify a focus need on certain habitats rather than listing every single species of importance there. And plants were used in setting those priorities. These beige or yellow, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, it's rather faint, quite a number of them. These plans did include habitat priorities, but plants were not considered in setting those priorities. The remaining states, those without their letters labeled, are in gray. Again, I can see that that's a little hard for you to see, but those states did not include prioritized habitats at all. So you can see that North Carolina is in that beige category. Habitats were prioritized, but plants were not included. Another way that these plans looked at plants in a sort of sideways way that didn't include them as species of greatest conservation need was to use them in focal areas instead, and identifying, such sites as important for conservation actions. Again, same color scheme. The green represent states with plans where focal areas were identified and plants were used in that process. The yellow, which is fewer this time, are plans with focal areas identified but plants not included. And then the remaining are plans that did not have focal areas identified, which you can see North Carolina is in that category. So that basically means that there's a lot of opportunity out there, not just in North Carolina, but in other states, to bring plants to the foreground. They're not just the background, right? They're not just the habitat, but to actually identify them in these plans, which, like I said before, have been sort of agreed upon as being a standardized method for setting statewide conservation strategies. So why are plants not there? This is not just something that the plant people are complaining about or trying to stir up some enthusiasm. There's actually a lot of interest from the top as well. So this approach, including plants in these plans, has been heavily encouraged by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So the Wildlife Resources Commission gets together with fish and game type groups from other states and has regular meetings and sets priorities at a regional and nation-wide level. And one of the things that that group has been identifying as a big need, going back to at least 2012, has been to do exactly this: add plants, please. For North Carolina, what this would mean is by including plants, we would be able to increase the number of partners that might be engaged with the Wildlife Action Plan, to identify projects there that there are multiple, overlapping needs that could be addressed in single projects, perhaps making them of a more suitable size and easier efficiency for getting, conservation actions accomplished, multiple objectives in one. And then also, it also means that by bringing multiple partners together, it really can increase the amount of potential match that all these types of federal funds almost always need. So to say that more partners can put their heads together is one thing, but to put their pocketbooks together too means that larger projects or more multi-part projects could be possible with more players in the game. What this also means is, so that would be true right now. If we had plants in the plan, there would be more opportunities to link existing needs together and have probably greater success. But on the horizon is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. I'm not sure if you've heard about this. I've certainly been talking about it a lot. Wildlife Resources Commission is thinking about it all the time. It's often referred to as just RAWA because it's a long name. But this bill has passed the House earlier this summer, July 2nd. The next step is going to the Senate. It has amazing amounts of bipartisan support, which is always a good thing. Everyone I talk to that is even closer to this than me, really, I think without being too ahead of themselves, is talking about when this passes, not if this passes. It's also coming on the tails of last year's big success of both restoring and permanently funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Despite things that might seem bad, there have been a lot of good movement and momentum on similar environmental actions. So this is looking quite good. What it would mean is bringing, I mean, at the most base level, it would bring at least $26 million of additional recurring funding to our state. I mean, it's much larger. Each state is going to get their own cut, but North Carolina could see $26 million every year that would be tied directly to that wildlife action plan. So in particular, addressing proposed projects that would help conserve those species of greatest conservation need. Another important thing is that the act as it stands would be redefining what species are potentially served this way, and it would update the language so that SGCNs can include flora as well. It would expand beyond only wildlife being fauna, essentially, to give states more clear guidance that they can include plants in their plans and that they would get funded, which had been something holding different states back in the past too, is an interpretation of that language. And then lastly, the real carrot on the stick is that I was mentioning the top-down support for states finding a way to add plants in their plans. They've also added this 5% bonus, the promise of additional funding for the states that do include plants. So again, it's not just little old PCP or similar small agencies or support groups saying this should happen. There's real momentum behind this and incentivization of it as well, which is really encouraging to see. So much of this year, I've been working with the Wildlife Resources Commission to find out what it would take to add plants to the existing Wildlife Action Plan. The next major update is due in 2025. Doesn't feel like it's, in some ways that feels like a long time for folks that are updating gigantic documents. It's, the right amount of time for what it's going to take. But it's too long, so we've Commission, what would it take and what exactly would we put forward? And what we've come up with, let me pause. I'm afraid I'm breaking up. Okay, I had a warning that my internet was not strong enough, so let me pick up where I was. So the Wildlife Resources Commission has agreed to submit our existing protected plant list as an appendix list to the existing plan ahead of the next major revision in 2025, so that they would exist as species of greatest conservation need. This update will require review and approval from Fish and Wildlife Service. I've come to understand they have two different avenues for updates to these plans that they review: minor revisions and major revisions. Major revisions are a much lengthier process. Minor revisions are much less, sort of makes sense. And so the plan for now is to submit our existing protected plan which could happen perhaps before then. And so that's in some ways is a little limiting because it's not reevaluating any other species. It's taking the list as it is. It would allow for automatic updates as our list is updated through the rule review that's underway at the moment. So by adding the existing 2010 list right now, it would be automatically referencing any updates that would occur in 2021. So that's an advantage. But what we've decided is that in time for the next major revision for 2025, that would allow us to have this existing list, the protected plant list, go in.
We're losing Lesley again.
And I'm sorry?
We're losing you again, Lesley.
Lesley, if you turn off your video, it might give you more bandwidth.
Are you hearing me? Okay. There. Hopefully that'll help. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if you missed anything that I said. I had started to pause there, but point being, we're going to submit a minor revision to try and get plants added to the plan as soon as possible, and consider future steps to maybe add additional, or to review additional species that don't quite meet the criteria for protected status in the state, but that might warrant being included in the Wildlife Action Plan, which does include, in general, species that aren't so imperiled, so that they can, like I said, be in that cadre of keeping common species common, but that still need some help. And I just wanted to add one little last bit, which is, you know, in prep of envisioning RAWA coming through, Wildlife Resources Commission has been working with other state agencies to start pre-planning some partnership projects, to start envisioning what would we do with $26 million extra a year. All of us have these, you know, wish lists, but we started putting them together and finding opportunities to see shared interest and you know, projects that could go nicely together, or projects that could give us some more information to help us make the next list of priorities. So through partnering in these conservation summits, there have been 3 of them so far over the last year and a half or so. This interagency group has identified 12-month pilot projects, for 1 or 3 for each major region of North Carolina. They are focused on SGCNs, but also at-risk species and federally protected species. So these conversations were sort of where I got this burr under my saddle to say, well, if we're gonna so focus on SGCNs, how are we gonna get more attention for plants? And so now we'll not just be there for listed species only, but also in short order be thinking about how we can consider plants in a more holistic way as the other agencies are putting their ideas on the table. The 3 pilot projects that PCP is going to be helping with is reviewing each agency's prescribed fire plans to find areas where at-risk species have been not getting the management they may benefit from, and help the different agencies consider how to write burn plans for those areas and for the special considerations those species may require. So we'll be participating in that in sort of a review and drafting type way. We'll also be, hopefully by getting plants into that SGCN list, the Heritage Program is going to be aiming to do greater inventory of public lands for all SGCNs, which PCP would like to see more help on the plant side of things for that. And then also just management plans, similar to the prescribed burning idea, reviewing and making sure that these plans do have consideration for species and being there to help give that advice and guidance. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's really exciting. I hope that, as short and sweet as that was, that I could properly convey how important adding an entire taxonomic group to such an important document really could be. I think it's going to be something that's going to bring plants to a much higher elevated profile. It's not going to be just, oh yeah, well, luckily PCP is handling that stuff, they can do it, which, I mean, I can kind of appreciate that attitude that people in different groups give us credit for the work that we do, but it would be a whole lot more effective if we could actually be encouraging other agencies to do more for plants as well. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions if I left things unclear though.
I got a question for you, Lesley. So I'm a community ecologist. So when I think about things like trying to protect animal species, for example, I think, well, you can't protect animal species unless you're also protecting the food that they eat, which requires, protecting plant species, and of course, protecting the habitat that those animals need to live in. Do you think that for the states that specifically have not included habitat or plant species in their conservation plans, do you think they are attempting to use wildlife species as kind of umbrella situations, saying that, well, if we protect the animal species, we're protecting everything underneath them? Or do you think it's more that they're trying to be able to somehow protect the animal species without having to necessarily protect certain kinds of habitat?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak for each one, certainly. I think there's probably a mixture of what you're describing happening, across the nation. I think there's a good bit of both. A lot of people that are in this field of work are, holistic thinkers, and they like ecology and they've studied ecology. And so they think of more than one thing at a time. But, by leaving other important considerations out of the planning process, we just know it can't, be fully evaluated and carefully, orchestrated. So I think there are some situations where there's a lot of, consideration to expand and, using wildlife as sort of an anchor to get, bigger work done or more holistic work done. But it just isn't the same when you're not taking a multivariate approach, is, I guess, my answer to that. I think it can only be better by actually bringing us all together and really considering these things. I mean, to put it the other way, I've felt a little under-resourced at times where I've, reached out to Alvin and other experts from Wildlife Resources, where I know I have a burn objective in a site for a suite of species that are plants. And I know that that's also an important, like amphibian site, but I don't know enough about them, to really be as careful and cognizant as I should be. So I have to reach out. I think by having this partnership built in, and it's not just requiring people to make the right phone calls, is going to be a game changer.
I think this is an excellent opportunity here. For years, we've tried to encourage with Wildlife Commission and being sort of joint with them and with Plant Conservation Program and Friends of Plant Conservation, that more collaborations along this line. And it's what you find with outfits like the Nature Conservancy and some of the land trust, Triangle Land Conservancy, Tar River Land Conservancy, Catawba Land Conservancy, various, have done a pretty good job at times of putting both plants and animals into their plans for conservation. And typically when you're looking at animal populations, if you're protecting areas, you're protecting larger areas than we are routinely with plants. And that's only to benefit, I think, for our plants, because it gives you, if the area is larger that your at-risk species are in, it gives you more opportunities for expanding those populations and not just protecting the little spot where they occur. So I really am excited about this opportunity and hope it can go forward and provide a good bit more funding for the conservation work we so desperately need here. So kudos, Lesley, go for it.
Thank you.
Carolyn McCormick, are there any species that are important to hunters that it would be a downside for habitat or plants as a management for, deer or something like that? Is there, I can't think of one, but be a case where the plants would suffer.
Well, Carol-Ann, this is Carrie DiGiaco. One of the biggest impacts on many native plant populations in a lot of areas of the eastern U.S. right now is actually damage due to overpopulating deer, because we have pushed most of the natural predators of deer away from areas that are dominated by people, which is pretty much everywhere now. Our deer populations in many, many places have exploded, and those deer are fairly particular in the types of plants that they choose to eat. They certainly have their favorite plants, and they will demolish their favorite species. So in a lot of areas, when you are trying to do plant conservation work, trying to limit the deer populations in an area is a significant effort. Now, in recent decades, we've had coyotes spread out along the eastern seaboard, and the coyotes are actually beginning to have an important impact on deer populations. So those coyotes have now been shown to not just have fawns in their diet, but they frequently, now it's been shown that they take down, or at least are able to eat adult deer as well. So now that we have those predators back in the mix, we may be able to see more natural decline of deer populations. But for many decades now, since we've had these very large deer populations, it has been important for us to maintain active hunting of deer populations in places where there are vulnerable populations of plants.
All right.
Any other questions relating to Leslie's talk? If not, then let's please welcome Olivia Dannemiller. She's the volunteer manager of the Friends of Plant Conservation, and she's going to give us an update on all of the activities of the FoPC volunteers and interns in recent months and within the last year. Thanks, Olivia.
Everyone, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Well, hello. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Olivia Dannemiller, and I'm the volunteer coordinator for Friends of Plant Conservation. And like Lesley mentioned earlier, I'm also working part-time for PCP. So currently I am full-time plant conservation, which is awesome because I get to work from home, but I also get to go out in the field every week. So it's going good. So today I'm going to share with you the volunteer opportunities that we've been able to have despite the pandemic. A lot of them have been reduced, but we were able to have some socially distanced work days. I will also share with you some of the Preserve Stewards activities throughout the year. And I will also share with you we had 3 interns over the summer, 1 who stayed on with the fall semester. So I'll share with you some of the work that they were able to accomplish while they were with us. All right, so before the pandemic hit and things were normal, we had a work day at Red Lair to help Haywood with some flood damage repair. So sort of like Julie was mentioning earlier, Catawba Lands Conservancy is an awesome partnership with us there. They are really key for helping us recruit volunteers. They are awesome partners to have there and definitely bring most of the folks out that we have help out there. So that day we were able to replace some bridges, as you can see in the photo. And we also checked on some recently planted saplings that had been displaced from the flood and to make sure that they were still secure in the ground. And then we also had some extra time to remove some non-native invasive species while we were there too, mostly privet is what we worked on. And then on March 26th, we had our annual Delaney Bog Work Day. This was sort of when, as you all know, right when the pandemic hit. So it sort of turned into a staff-only work day with Plant Conservation Program and Highland Cashers Land Trust. So they are one of our key partners for that site. Typically this day is in partnership with all 3 partners, which is Highland Cashers Land Trust, U.S. Forest Service and Highlands Biological Station. But this year we only worked with the 2 partners, and we worked on an ongoing project removing the encroaching woody species that were encroaching on the pitcher plants there. And then May 15th, we had our first socially distanced work day. And so I went out to Melrose Mountain Preserve in Polk County and invited the Polk County Master Gardeners to come out. So we went out and dug up some ornamental hostas that are found on the site. So they are spreading pretty rapidly on the edge of the preserve. And so we went out and dug them up and allowed the participants to take them home and plant them in their own gardens. So it's a win-win kind of work day. And this is something we could probably do every year with the amount of hostas that are there and available to dig up. And then we had a summer with not a ton of events. And then on August 13th, we had our annual Liatris helleri monitoring at Patty Mountain. So that was with our PCP staff, myself, an intern, one of our interns with FoPC, and then a student from Appalachian State. So we were able to go out there and accomplish the fall monitoring and gather all the data that was needed. And then on September 23rd, so this month, we've had a few socially distanced work days. So September 23rd, we went out to Cedar Mountain Bog Preserve, and that was in partnership with Conserving Carolina. So they're one of our key land trust partners for that site. Tori Newgart, who I'll mention later in the presentation too, is a preserve steward there, and he also works at Conserving Carolina, so he helps bring volunteers from there. So we had some just regular volunteers, we had Conserving Carolina staff, and then Conserving Carolina AmeriCorps members, and then also some Transylvania County Master Gardeners out. So we were able to accomplish a lot that day. We worked on thinning out the core bog area and removing some encroaching woody species on that and opening up the sunlight for the plants. And then this week we had 2 work days at Mineral Springs Barrens and Redler Preserve. So these are our annual Schweinitz sunflower monitoring days. These ones are also key partnerships with Catawba Lands Conservancy and Carolina Thread Trail, which is under Catawba Lands Conservancy, so sort of the same. So they help us bring tons of volunteers out to those days. And we were also lucky to have the mayor join us from Mineral Springs Barrens for that work day too. But I heard that I was not able to attend, but I heard both of those days went well. And then for our preserve stewards, so I'm just going to highlight some of the preserve steward projects throughout the year. They are awesome because they're able to perform ongoing stewardship and monitoring tasks throughout the whole year, and they can work independently, and also lots of them help out bring extra volunteers to the preserves that otherwise we wouldn't be able to have, and they can lead those work days for us. So I will start with Redler Preserve. So on that note, a lot of our preserve stewards are in this meeting. So if they have anything that they want to add after my presentation, definitely feel free. Even if I don't mention you in the next few slides, but you are a preserve steward, please feel free to add something or tell the group anything if you'd like. So at Redler Preserve, we have Haywood Rankin. He volunteers almost every single day. He has his continuous battle of fighting non-native invasive species, keeps the extensive trail network in tip-top shape, and he also leads tours and shows others the wonders of the preserve whenever we ask or whenever is needed. So I also have a short video that I'll show you all right here of him sort of introducing himself and sharing what a day of him working on the preserve might look like. So let me know if this doesn't work for you.
I can't hear him, Olivia. Can anyone else hear?
Yeah, so I've run into this problem before because the basically your computer is playing that sound, but it's not projecting it through Zoom.
Okay. Is there a way to change that? 'Cause I have a few videos.
On your control panel, there should be at the bottom 3 dots. And if you click on that, and I think there's an option, something to the extent of share computer audio.
Okay. I don't see share computer audio on there. I see screen, arrow options, subtitle settings.
I wonder if you simply turn up the volume on your own computer, if then the mic would pick that up. I don't know.
Oops.
Olivia, I know that when one shares a video from like directly from another source, like a web browser, when you share it, you have to, when you share the screen, you have to designate that you want to share the audio. So, and that's,
Okay, wait. I think I got it. I see share computer sound. So let's see if that works. Okay.
Okay, I am
everyone
Haywood
here?
Rankin. We are standing on. Okay, I am Haywood Rankin. We are standing on one of the larger plant conservation program properties that used to belong to my family. And we have Lesley Starke, Catherine Palata, Olivia Dannemiller here. We're on the way to the river bottoms to study grasses. But on the way, I have persuaded them to come through this great forest and answer a question I have, because you can see a mighty white oak and a mighty hickory tree that unfortunately lived far too close together, split apart in the worst possible way. The white oak has smashed against a beech tree and taken half of it down. That's all incredibly tragic and sad, because we rarely see our white oaks and hickories replace themselves. And so what we have is suddenly in this great climax forest a great gap where sunlight is. I know one of the trees that will benefit from that is this big leaf magnolia, which there are lots of little ones and so forth. They will be very happy. But if you look around, what are the medium-sized trees that will take advantage of this? Well, there's sourwood, but there's certainly maple. The beech trees, more beech trees, little beech trees, big beech trees, redbud. Does anybody see an oak or a hickory in the understory here? You have to look very hard. I'm not sure. There may be. I just haven't found it. So this is happening on Red Lair. We're lucky to have these incredible climax forests, but they were apparently kept open either by burning or grazing, and there was enough sunlight that little oaks and hickories could prosper, and they are not doing so now. And when we do have an opening, that would be when the little oaks and hickories would presumably be happy and grow up. But if there's none there, that's not going to happen. So, do I artificially come in here and cut this maple down and that big beech tree down and everything that's not a hickory or an oak, and then plant hickories and oaks, or throw out a lot of acorns? It's a question that a fundamental philosophical question that we face here at Red Lair.
Okay, was everyone able to hear that time? Assuming yes. Okay. Okay, so moving on. Thank you, Haywood, for that video. At Feather Wet Prairie, we have Dennis Testerman. So he wrote this introduction for us, so I'll just read it off. Dennis's sense of the sacredness of natural areas began in the old growth forest on the Southern Appalachian Mountain Cove Farm that's been in his family since 1789. This forest, a Tennessee registered natural heritage area, inspired Dennis to spearhead the county natural heritage inventory that officially identified the Southern Wet Prairie, which he now cares for as a preserve steward. So Dennis helps keep up with communications and tours needed on the preserve throughout the year. Thank you, Dennis. At Cedar Mountain Bog, we have Tori Newgart. So he's been a preserve steward there for 4 years. He, like I said earlier, works at Conserving Carolina. So he's a key part of our partnership there. So he helps us bring AmeriCorps members and volunteers through them. He also helps recruit Transylvania County Master Gardeners as well. But he visits the preserve multiple times a month, keeps a hawk's eye view on everything using his former park ranger skills. And this year he was able to help with the thinning workday that we had this month. And he also helped a lot with removing with non-native invasive species, specifically microstegium this year. And at Tater Hill, we have Matt Estep. He introduced himself earlier today to elaborate on his role as a preserve steward. So he is the preserve steward for Tater Hill. He's a professor at Appalachian State. He helps bring students out regularly to the preserve for volunteer work. And he also helps bring students out to our Patty Mountain Preserve volunteer opportunities like the Liatris Helleri monitoring that we have once a year there. He's also always willing to give a tour of the preserve when we ask. Our newest preserve steward is Alan Smith. So he is at Bat Fork Bog and Ocklawaha Bog. So he's taking the role of 2 preserve stewards for both of those sites. So I will also read off this one because he wrote this up for us. He is a retired professor of biology, more or less equally trained and interested in ornithology, botany, and ecology. Career in academia at 3 colleges and universities, including Lynchburg College, Warren Wilson College, and 26 years at Mars Hill University, where he lives now. And he also worked as an independent contract conservation biologist for agencies and organizations, including the U.S. Forest Service, the Nature Conservancy, National Park Service, SJHC, NC National Heritage Program, and other private groups and individuals. So he grew up in Southern Alabama and migrated north after college and has roamed the Southern Appalachians for over 40 years. So he is helping us protect rare plants from deer browsing. He's helping thin bog areas. He's been helping me a lot at Cedar Mountain Bog with that project as well. And he's also helping with invasive species removal at all of the sites. And then we have Jeff Marcus at Eastwood Preserve, who's already spoke during this meeting. So he lives in a house on the preserve and serves as the caretaker with his wife and daughter. He gives regular tours of the preserve, especially during peak blooming periods. So he helped with the NC Botanical Gardens partnership field trip that we had there recently that Julie mentioned and spoke on. He also has a continuous battle of removing non-native invasive species from the preserve. And another big project he worked on this year was restoring an ephemeral wetland for frogs, toads, and salamanders to make a better habitat for them. And you can see that in the picture in the top right. And at Delaney and Cedar Cliff Mountain Preserves, we have a sort of a partnership preserve steward in a way. Highland Cashiers Land Trust is a key partnership at those sites. Gary Wine and Kyle Purcell specifically know tons about the site. They are always willing to help give a tour or help with the workday when needed. They were also key in acquiring those preserves. And I also just wanted to show off these awesome drone pictures that Jeff Austin, the new plant ecologist for PCP, took while we were out there this month. Then lastly, I have Pat and Herb Amix. So one of our interns' duties was to create some educational videos while she was with us. So Rachel Milkwright created this video, and it's really a good introduction to both of them. So I am just going to let that speak for itself, and I will show you all the video.
Herb Amix, Friends of Plant Conservation.
Pat Amix, also Friends of Plant Conservation and stewards. We became very interested in becoming stewards by going to a meeting, an annual meeting in Wilmington in 2010. We were given a tour of the preserves and explained what our duties would be, and that we could do as little or as much as we wanted to do to be volunteers. And that's how we got started. There's 6 tracks that we take care of. The ones in the Eno Diaries one, and also there's one in Butner. Heads home, and we would get the seeds out of them and then plant them at home, and then late in the summer plant them back into the tract that they came from.
It's a highly invasive form of clematis. It's a vine, it's evergreen, has a very rapid growth rate, and it tends to smother out the plants under it. So we try to eliminate it anytime we find it in the preserves.
I have a book for every tract, and we take rough notes while we're here, and when we go home we write them into the books, and it's really helped us to look back on the history of each tract of land. If anyone else would ever take over our job, then they would also know what was done. It truly is whatever you want to make it be.
So I'd love to have a video like that of all of our preserve stewards across the board.
Herb Amix.
All right, so again, that's not all of our preserve stewards. We still have a few more. I just wanted to highlight some of their work throughout the year. And then, like it's been mentioned a few times, we had 3 internships over the summer, one of which is continuing throughout the fall semester. So first we had Shannon Dolan. She's a junior at NC State, majoring in environmental sciences, and she helped us create ArcGIS story maps. So these are unique and interactive ways to sort of learn and view some of our preserves. She created one on Redler Preserve and one on our Durham County Preserve. So those will eventually live on our website where you can view them. I can also send you the link to them after this meeting. And at the end of my presentation, I will go through one of them with you just to show you what it's like. Next, we had Miranda Huff, and she is a senior also at NC State, majoring in environmental sciences. So she is helping us create some youth education activities and lessons that are based on plants and botany and plant conservation. And when finished with the project, she will put these on our website, and we hope that these will be used by teachers, non-formal educators, and parents. That is pretty exciting there. And then lastly, we had Rachel Milkwright. She's a junior at Appalachian State University. So she helped with a variety of tasks this summer. She helped create an ongoing preserve steward training program. She helped provide stewardship work on the preserves with me in the mountains and Fisher in the Triangle area, including removing non-native invasive species and treating them with herbicide, as well as bog thinning, removing woody encroaching species, and she also helped with the monitoring of the Liatris hellerii at Patty Mountain. And lastly, she helped us create these educational videos, like the one I just showed you in the last slide. The Amixes, she created that. Additionally, she created a video of a tour of the Durham County Preserves, mostly featuring Milo Pine, but it also has the amexes in that one. So a couple of the scenes are repeated, but I will show you guys that in our next slide.
Up here we call it diabase. This is a nice big boulder. Some squirrels have been sitting here doing their nutting, so it's part of the natural environment of this site. This rock, it's a volcanic rock, what we call igneous, so it bubbled up from the earth as hot lava and cooled in ancient times. It weathers down into smaller and smaller chunks until eventually it's pebbles and little clay soil, a very thick clay soil that sometimes is a dark gray color, unlike the red clays of most of the Piedmont. So this rock is different in its chemical composition. It's got weird metals in it, and it's a lower pH, so it's not as acidic as the normal rocks of the Piedmont, and that's why we have these plants here like the coneflower and Agastache nepetoides and other plants that in other parts of their range actually grow on calcium or dolomite-derived soils. So it's very unusual for the Piedmont. And the other thing here is you probably will not find a blueberry or anything in that family Ericaceae. Again, the soils are so circumneutral that the acidic-loving plants aren't happy. So if you're in a place in North Carolina with no members of that Ericaceae family, you are in a special place. And here we are today. We love to see these big oak trees. This is a beautiful old white oak with this platy bark. It's a very thick platy bark. That helps this tree be resistant to and tolerant of fire. So controlled fire is used to manage the site and keep the understory open. But we love these big, beautiful oak trees. The two most prominent ones here are white oak and then post oak. We'll take a look at a post oak. This is a big, beautiful post oak here, probably a 70 to 100-year-old tree. Again, like white oak, the bark is very fire resistant. The leaf is a big, thick, leathery leaf, kind of with a cross shape. So that's how you would tell this from white oak. The other components of what would naturally be a woodland here, there's a lot of smaller eastern red cedar, and there's been a lot of American ash, but sadly we're losing the ash to the emerald ash borer. Here's an absolutely beautiful shagbark hickory, part of our diabase woodland. Long, dramatic, shaggy bark on this tree. And again, the thick bark helps it to be resistant to the periodic fires that come through here to help keep the understory open. This is a shortleaf pine. The cones are smaller and the needles are shorter, and there's usually 2 or maybe 3 in a bundle. Loblolly always has 3. So this tree has got kind of a smoother bark, it's flaky, and then down here at the base you can see how it got a little fire scar, but it's perfectly happy with that. This is a nice component of our, what would be a oak, hickory, pine diabase wood. So here on these plant conservation preserves, we have to keep an active watch out for invasive exotic species. This is kind of a new one. It's called Youngia japonica or Asiatic false hawk's beard, something like that. They're little rosettes. They kind of look like a lyre-leaf sage, but the leaf shape is different and they don't have the purple color. So when I find these, of course you can't get them out of every sidewalk crack, but when I find them in natural areas, I try to remove the whole plant and take it off site. Because they're very sneaky. They can set seed. They come in early. I thought they were an annual, but now they seem to be growing bigger and behaving like a perennial. So this is a real threat to our natural areas and native plant populations.
Which is a highly invasive form of clematis. It's a vine, it's evergreen, has a very rapid growth rate, and it tends to smother out the plants under it. So we try to eliminate it anytime we find it in the preserves.
see the railroad iron here. So this was originally cleared and opened up for a railroad track. Probably carried tobacco from northern Durham County into the tobacco factories in town. The railroad, as you can see, was abandoned. A water line was put in here, and that reopened the site and brought more attention to the site. And then just a couple of years ago, on a native plant tour of the site, Lesley Starke discovered the sumac, which is another federally listed plant. It's very unusual. Apparently likes the dye-based soil, but it mostly likes it open. So this area had grown up in loblolly pine, and then it was cleared, and then the sumac, which was already naturally here, began to flower and thrive. It's a great success story in terms of management of the site, being aware of its history as an open area on the dye base, and then the recovery of this population of the rare sumac.
We got really lucky today. This is a beautiful little orchid. Brownish purple. It's got no chlorophyll, so it must be parasitic or saprophytic. It's got some other means of getting its nutrition other than having green leaves. It's called the Hexalectris spicata. So we're right here in a dye-based jumble of boulders, and here's this beautiful little orchid.
This is truly one of the most beautiful plants that you can find in the dye-based derived soils around northern Durham. This is a tall larkspur. This is Delphinium exaltatum, and it's a beautiful and just remarkable plant. It likes the lower slopes, which are more moisture, mesic type of areas. Even though it's in the dye-based woodlands, it's an unusual phase of that woodland community. It makes it harder for them to survive because probably fire would not have been as frequent here. They're found on roadsides, and they have a hard life there with potentially mowing and herbicide use under power lines. It really is an extremely threatened plant as well as a very beautiful plant.
Agastache nephitoides, which is the yellow giant hyssop. They have square stems. They're in the mint family, and these have very woody stems that last sometimes 2 or 3 years. But you can always feel the 4 sides to the stem. And generally, the new growth comes up at the base of those stems. This one is about maybe 5 feet tall. It is really a giant hyssop. It goes through very large swings in population size, and it's probably related to fire. And once the prescription burns have stopped, then it begins to decline. And following a big prescription burn, we have an explosion of population.
This is a native clematis, and it's unusual because it's not a scrambling vine. It's almost like a little shrub, and it has this beautiful seed head with these arching things that come off the top of each seed, so people call it curly heads. It's a really cute name for it. Shines in the sun, kind of a light golden or copper color. So we're here to look at a population of Echinacea levigata, the smooth coneflower. And this is basically a Piedmont and Ridge and Valley endemic. It goes from the limestones of Virginia down through North Carolina on diabase rock and down into Georgia and South Carolina. Very scattered populations. It's federally listed as endangered. And here in the preserves around Penny's Bend, we've done a lot of management and augmentation of these populations to be sure they survive. This looks excellent today. The flowers are a little bit beyond their peak of bloom. The very narrow petals hang down, they decline. And the leaves are very smooth, as the name would indicate. So this is a really special plant, and we're really proud of the work that the Friends of Plant Conservation and the Plant Conservation Program have done with this site. It's really special.
We are at the back of Williams, which is separated quite a bit from the front. And if you look across to the slope that goes up, you will see the back of the Freudenberg property. And that is where we found some smooth coneflowers, 3 plants. And we have planted seeds from those and have put them here on the back to grow. So we have, I think, 21 or 22 plants that started out as seeds from the Freudenberg one. Deer are much more active in the back of the area, so we have to spray, and we put cages around most of them when they first get started, just to protect them and give them a chance to get established. Herb, what's in your deer spray?
It's a lot of rotten eggs.
So Rachel Milkwright helped us create that video. And then next, I'm going to show you one of Shannon Dolan's projects, the Red Layer Story Map. I'm just going to skim through it just to show you guys the overall gist of it. I'm not going to pause at each paragraph so that you all can read through it. You guys can look at it another time, but I'm going to see if this link works to take you to it. If not, I can pull it up another way. All right, did that take you to my web browser or not?
No.
No? Okay.
Nope.
Let's do a new share. Okay, now?
Yep, we see it now.
Okay, so this is the ArcGIS story map. So again, she created one on Red Layer and one on our Durham County Preserves. So this is the Red Layer one. All you need to do when you get to this first page is just scroll down really to interact. And then later on, there's some things you can click to go through. So first she touches on the history of the preserve. Pause for a little bit to let you all read through, skim it if you'd like. And if you keep scrolling, it shows a nice photo. If you wanted to see the photo closer up, you can click on it, or I guess it puts it further away actually, but full screen. Then you can just exit, just keep scrolling down. So then she touches on the Rankin family history. And she touches on natural communities. So she gives a definition of each of the communities found there throughout here, and also provides a link to if you wanted to read further about the definitions and see where they came from. So you
One of the
can.
impressive things is how many interactions are possible. There are many links and many places to go, so it's not a one-dimensional reading. You can explore whatever parts you're interested in.
Exactly. So I'm not going to actually click the link and take you there, but if you wanted to, you could. But yeah, it's pretty long, so I'll just keep scrolling. So what makes Red Layer so unique? And some photos of some work days. But again, I'll provide you with this link so you can fully dive into this map later. But then it has some interactive areas. So it gives you directions on how to navigate it on the right here. But I'll just show you, you can click on each of these different colored areas and it tells you more about the area. And then route. And if you keep scrolling down, it just zooms in and tells you more about it. So you can click on Red Layer, it tells you. And then shows some plant species that are found there. Focuses on the big leaf magnolia. And you can scroll through the photos. And then keep scrolling down. I'll show another video. I'll show this one of Haywood too, just showing the largest big leaf magnolia on the preserve.
Well, hello. This is a big leaf magnolia. It may or may not be the biggest big leaf magnolia on Red Layer, the 1,200 acres of Red Layer, depending on which person you talk to who has measured it. But our big leaves don't tend to get any bigger than about 13.5 inches in diameter at breast height. They are a sort of an understory tree, a largish understory tree, and they're very happy on steep primeval slopes like this one, especially when they're north-facing, as this exactly is north-facing. You see this combination here between big leaf magnolia and mountain laurel. We also have quite a bit of mountain laurel on north-facing slopes like this. The big leaf is the reason why Red Layer is protected by the Plant Conservation Program, that and the Schweinitz-Sohn-Cow. And it seems to be doing very well. If I could pan around, you would see an enormous number of baby big leaves and a good many on this slope that are, by our standards, really huge. There is a big leaf at Biltmore that is 25 inches in diameter, which is slightly embarrassing to us here. But of course, it's not native there and did not grow there, but was planted there and taken care of, I guess, for years and years and years. We don't take care of these, they just grow here the way they grow. And they're doing exceptionally well. They must like global warming, I suppose. Anyway, they're expanding rather than the opposite. Well, hello.
All right. Then she touches on the Schweinitz sunflower and how Red Layer is home to the champion chopped maple.
I have an update on that, not to interrupt you for too long.
Yeah, no problem.
When you read through this, it says that it was identified as the state champion, and that in doing that, it unseated the national champion. I just got notice earlier this week that the national champion tree list was updated, and you can go there and see that for sure, the chalk maple at Red Layer is the national champion.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Awesome. So there's Bob measuring the national chalk maple. So let's see our certification. There's CV. And then just some more plant photos and plants found on the preserve. So as you can see, this is a super interactive way to learn about the preserve rather than just visiting a web page or reading a paper. And then here she shows some maps. Again, it gives you directions on how to work it. So you can click on the specific dots to numbers to learn more about each one. Pop up. And then if you keep scrolling, shows you this industrial farm land map of Gaston County, and then zooms in, Red Layer. And then this one is fun. It shows you the aerial images from 1938 to 2019. So you can
slide across,
yeah, to sort of see, compare. And it tells you right here, click and drag the arrows left to right to compare. So in most spots throughout the map you should be able to read to learn how to navigate it. And then this one just shows the satellite images throughout the years. And as you scroll, it changes. And then some conservation efforts. I'll just scroll through here. Some more photos. Some invasives found. Work days. More on monitoring the shriness of sunflower, the work that we do for that. How to get involved. So it has a link that takes you right to our volunteer page on our website. A ton of links here about the Red Lair Observatory and more about some details in Red Lair. We found the stewardship committee, and then just ends with links to our website, Facebook, Instagram, and an email and our phone number if they have more information. So we'll share this on our website and probably through our social media and other outlets. But we first wanted to share it at our annual meeting. So you all are the first people to find it, but I can provide the links to these in chat, and they'll also live on our website, most likely under our education tab, and as well as under the individual preserve tab as well. That is all I have for you all. So I will stop sharing my screen. And does anyone have any questions, or did any of the preserve stewards want to introduce themselves or add anything to what I touched on for you?
Well, thank you, Olivia. That was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed learning about the stuff that they did this summer. That was really, really enjoyable.
The only other thing I'll add to that, Olivia, is you mostly showed what's already finished, and you touched on our third intern that's still working. There'll be more to be revealed at a future date. Those environmental education lessons are still in development. So these will go up on the website, but then we'll have to send out another announcement when those additional resources are available, but they're looking just as good.
Okay, so that is the end of our presentations for today's annual meeting. What we planned to do for the remainder of our session here was to try to get some feedback from the meeting participants. We would love to know what kinds of things you guys would like to see more of, or what sorts of things you would like to be involved in. We know these are very difficult times right now, especially for people to be able to actually get together to do things. But we want to do everything we can to try to keep our members involved and to make sure that we can keep people active and connected as much as possible. So if you guys have any suggestions and ideas of things that you would like to do, things that you would like to see us do, please just shout out. So we're getting some comments from Matt Estep in the chat box. So he says he would like to see service days on different preserves. So that's certainly something we can work on putting together. What else would you guys like to do, or what would help you feel more connected to FoPC?
Well, I would certainly like more opportunities to see, visit, and help with the various preserves. That's something that Olivia has helped us do, and something that Lesley has been helping us with, but that certainly seems a core part of this, is both learning and servicing at the same day.
I was just going to suggest, maybe while people are thinking of ideas to offer, maybe Olivia, could you touch a little bit and explain the work and learn format, which has been sort of what our what we used to do is more or less field trips and or work days. We've sort of combined these ideas, and we've been doing it a little bit. This year's been a little slow for the obvious reasons, but maybe you could describe those just for everyone that might not be as familiar.
Yeah, so how we've sort of transformed our volunteer work days to encourage more volunteers to come out. We start with a morning of volunteer work, stewardship work that needs to be done hands-on on the preserve. And then we take a break for lunch, and they typically go 10 to 2. Not always, but that's typical schedule. And then after lunch in the afternoon, we have an opportunity to sort of walk through and learn about the preserve and the unique habitat that it has to offer. So usually that's Lesley giving the tour of the preserve, but in the future or Haywood certainly gives the tour at Red Lair, and I'm sure Matt has given tours after work days at Tater Hill. So definitely changes throughout, but something I think we'd like to do in the future is partner more for the learn part of those work and learns and bring outside groups into the preserve to offer additional educational opportunities and subjects that we might not be able to offer. So that's something that we'd like to do moving forward, but that's the idea of a work and learn.
So in our chat box, we're getting some comments and questions. So I'll go on and read those out for anyone who doesn't have that up. So Carol Ann McCormick has asked, as a new member, how do I find out about field trips? Cindy Lincoln responded that they're usually on the FoPC website and suggested maybe Olivia could share the link. Let's see. Thomas Wentworth comments that he echoes Matt's ideas of work days, perhaps coupled with field trips. So we kind of just talked about what our current sort of setup is for that. And Lesley mentions that these are advertised on both the FoPC and the PCP's websites. They're also announced in the newsletters, and then reminder emails are sent out to the FoPC membership. As our social media have become more active, activities are also being advertised there. So I would encourage anyone who is interested in being more actively involved in these sorts of things to come check our website now and then. Become our friend on Facebook, or connect with us via other social media aspects. You'll stay up to date on all of the sorts of things that we have going on. Olivia has posted in the chat box. So if you're not familiar with Zoom already, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little icon with a little message bubble that says chat. And if you click on that, that will bring up the chat box so you can see everything that's in there. So Olivia has posted a link for the field trips there. That's on our website, www.ncplantfriends.org. And there is a page there for field trips. So you can find links to those sorts of things there. Any other suggestions on things that we could do as a group to help keep you, our members, involved and active in the plant conservation efforts?
There may be some, with connections improving between state agencies, the Wildlife Commission and the Wildlife Action Plan, some opportunities to maybe touch base with some of the hunt clubs around the state to get them a little bit more informed about rare plant species. And actually plant diversity promotes good wildlife diversity. So any concept that trying to help out the plant species is going to diminish the hunting should be try to counter that up front before it gets rolling in the wrong direction. So just a thought there. From the wildlife side and the non-game side, I've been trying for years to work with hunt clubs to get them to, for instance, don't kill the snakes you happen to run across out in the woods. They're part of the natural system. But so it's may think along those lines, and when Lesley's in touch with the commission folks, see what their ideas are. possibly a little bit broader communication that we can foster and maybe gather some members that way.
Carrie, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. There's a little activity going on here in the house. I'm trying to protect you from that. Lesley Starke just asked if one of the board members could maybe talk a bit about the Speakers Bureau. Anybody want to speak up about that at all? We do have a list on the website of some members of the FoPC who are interested in and would be eager and excited to come speak with various groups on a variety of topics. So if you belong to any groups that typically invite speakers to come speak with you about things, you might want to check that page out on the FoPC website to see if any of our speakers might have talks that would be of interest to the groups with whom you're associated. And of course, right now, we're trying to minimize contact between people, but there are lots of different organizations these days that are having a lot of meetings and conferences to keep their members involved via platforms like Zoom, like we're doing right now. So we can indeed give talks through this sort of platform to try to help keep everybody interested and entertained and involved. Brian asks, is there a target species recommendation list from FoPC for native plant nurseries and horticulturists? I am not aware of that. There are several good native plant nurseries in the state. I know that the North Carolina Botanical Gardens has plant sales from which you can buy various plants. I'm not sure about how that necessarily ties in with FoPC. Does anyone else associated with FoPC know anything about involvement with native plant nurseries or horticulturalists? Lesley suggests this is a good opportunity to connect with the Native Plant Society. That's very true. I'm quite involved in the chapter of the Native Plant Society down here in the Charlotte area. The Native Plant Society down here is quite active. The North Carolina Native Plant Society has various chapters around the state for those of you who aren't familiar with that. So I'm involved in the Southern Piedmont chapter in the Charlotte area. And we have meetings every month. We've been doing it lately via Zoom. The UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens actually just had a plant sale last week. And native plant societies are also really good places. Our chapter, for example, every year in December has a seed swap. And so people who have native plants growing on their own properties will collect a bunch of seeds from plants in their yards, and they'll bring them in. We'll put them in envelopes, and everybody can go around and take some seeds of various kinds of plants that they're interested in having. I've gotten tons and tons of seeds of many different plants that way. That's a fantastic way to get involved with trying to propagate native plant species on your own property. It certainly does. It's wonderful for us to have just little micro spaces in our yards for trying to provide food for pollinators and other wildlife, and try to maintain genetic diversity among plant populations. Our own yards can act as kind of little islands from which native plants can jump from one to one as they're trying to get from one preserved area to another, little stepping stone kinds of habitats in between. Carol Ann McCormick has posted in the chat box, and Milo Payne has posted in the chat box links to sources for native plants and plant sales. And Anna Katrin Rose says she has lots of native plant seeds from the Boone area. So if anyone is interested in getting some native plant seeds, you might want to reach out to Ann Catron, and she might be able to hook you up there. So there are some ideas.
Okay. Any other comments or suggestions?
Pine, not pain, sorry.
Well, I think maybe it's time to say this has been a great meeting, and thank you all for participating. Any last comments before we adjourn for the year? We hope we can look forward to you participating in other activities and events, and we will try and keep you informed of these.
I have one last thing to say, Bob, and it's a little bit of an update I failed to mention earlier. At the last annual meeting, I was making big promises about inviting the Friends of Plant Conservation to come join us to outplant some rare plants at the Picture Creek Diabase Barrens in Granville County as part of a project we've been working on with NCDA research stations and the North Carolina Botanical Garden. I just wanted to let you know that you didn't miss that announcement. I didn't leave you out, or we didn't do that on purpose. We've actually had to postpone that event. So continue to stay tuned. We'll hope to set another date. It's unclear at this moment if it'll be later this fall or if we'll be looking to next spring. But I didn't want anyone to leave today and think, I never heard about that, or they failed to follow up. That's the update. It's been postponed.
I just want to thank everybody. Thanks for your confidence and trust, and I look forward to working with you all in the coming year.
Thanks to all of you for attending our Zoom get together today. It's great to see all these faces. So thanks for caring. Thanks for participating.
All righty.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye, thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.